Chapter 230. A few days ago, the guards that Han Shao had sent out contacted the Wanderer settlement dozens of miles away. They stated the purpose of the sanctuary and invited the Wanderers to live or work there. They used food and smiling service to open the way, and some Wanderers who were not living well agreed to move. From afar, hundreds of Wanderers saw the 10-meter-tall wall that was under construction with the words Black Phantom, Sanctuary 3 written in red. They were all in disbelief. Didn't they just settle down in gray metal ruins a few days ago? This doesn't look like it was just started. A middle-aged man asked hesitantly. He was asking the same question that everyone else was wondering. Originally, they thought that since the shelter had just been established, the conditions should be very difficult. In the imagination of the rogues, the style should not be as good as their small shabby houses in the settlement. They were all mentally prepared to suffer, but reality gave them a big surprise. Did they spend all their time building the wall? Someone asked doubtfully. Following the main road into the sanctuary, this doubt disappeared immediately. The Wanderers were like Granny Lou entering the Grandview Garden. It was too much for their eyes to take in. Looking at the tall wall, neat buildings, and paved roads, no one dared to believe that this was built in less than 10 days. It took them a few days to build a wooden house. The guards led the dizzy Wanderers to their accommodation. It was not a tent or a wooden house, but a brand new bunker with many rooms. There was also electricity and water, and there were ingredients in the kitchen, so they could cook by themselves. The huge surprise was like a charging bull, fiercely pressing against everyone's heart. Why would this be called a sanctuary? It would be better to call it a resort. Your Excellency, we have brought back 427 Wanderers. There are 15 settlements dozens of miles away, and the total number of Wanderers is about 3,500. We're negotiating with the other groups. Currently, about 300 Wanderers have clearly rejected us, and the others have not said anything. Lu Chao immediately reported to Han Shao. Only about 400 Wanderers, that was a bit too little. The purpose of the sanctuary was to protect humans, and accepting Wanderers was the biggest goal. It would be a joke if no one lived in the city after it was built. There were very few Wanderers in the Gorst wastelands, and the Wanderers who lived further away might not be willing to migrate. If they wanted people to live here, Han Shao felt that they needed Bennett's macro control. That was to move the refugees from other areas who were willing to live in shelters here in batches. However, this should be done after the plan matured. Right now, it was still in the early stages of construction. Waving his hand to signal Lu Chao to leave, Han Shao walked back to the workshop while thinking about the situation. One of the requirements of his Sanctuary 3 main storyline mission was to have a population of 40,000, not including the players. This was one of the requirements with the most generous rewards, and it would significantly increase the overall mission rating. Walking on the streets, Han Shao saw the lively scene of player activity. He knew that in order to achieve the player main city plan, there had to be NPCs living here. It would be best if they were important figures. These were all quest resources that would attract players to gather. It just so happened that the residents were also a requirement of the shelter, which was closely linked to his plan. This is a long-term job, Han Xiaoxing thought. Occasionally, players would approach him, wanting to buy equipment. Han Xiao did not mind. He would get rid of some of the useless equipment in his inventory and earn a new sum of money. Back in the workshop, the refiner was still working. Han Xiao was in good condition, and he did not want to waste his good condition. He took out the parts and started to craft the composite compounded split magnetic chain split blades. This time, it was much easier than before. This time, he felt it. The noise of the refiner echoed in the workshop. Han Shao was not disturbed by the noise and was immersed in crafting. When the refiner stopped, he was also done with his work. You have crafted the composite compounded split magnetic chain split blades. Purple, class advancement requirement. Complete 5 purple equipment with energy rank 60 and above. Progress. 1/5 Han Shao let out a sigh of relief. He felt much more relaxed. Everything was difficult at the beginning. This was the same as forgiveness. If there was a first time, there would be a second and third time. He would get used to it sooner or later. I should be able to complete the class advancement within this month, Han Shao thought to himself. Without looking at the interface, Han Xiao knew the attributes of the purple equipment by heart. Starting from the blue equipment, the difference between the quality of the equipment would gradually increase. The basic attributes of the purple equipment will be 20 to 30% higher than the blue equipment. The purple compounded split magnetic chain split blades had higher damage than the blue equipment, and the gap between the quality of the equipment would be even bigger. After replacing the blue equipment with the purple equipment, Han Xiao went to check the refiner's results. 2 tons of raw crystal ore had turned into a small pile of pure blue rhombus-shaped crystals. Each crystal was about half the size of a palm and could be held with one hand. The raw crystal was filled with ice cracks and mist-like patterns, but the purified crystal was clear and transparent. Light could pass through the crystal without any hindrance and refract it inside. It was as if there was a mini sun floating inside the crystal. Beginner Energy Crystal contains pure energy with no attribute. Can be converted and extracted. Energy crystals were most commonly used in the Crystal Civilization and Magic Civilization. Some creatures also ate energy crystals. Han Xiao nodded. Other than storing energy, he had not thought of other ways to use the energy crystals. Every profession had its own specialization, and the mage class had more ways to use the energy crystals. I'll store them first. There are some shadow stalker viper's eggs in the warehouse. I could try to cultivate them. Artificial feeding of waste materials should provide me with an additional source of energy crystals, Han Xiaoxin thought. Cultivating the eggs required a professional, and Yi-Etching was perfect for it. Late at night, the sky was filled with stars. Star Dragon border. The rotors created a gust of wind, and a black, heavy helicopter slowly landed. The grass was blown all over the place. Several stern-looking Star Dragon Special Forces soldiers carried a person off the plane. This person was wearing a metal-on mask and a restraining gown. She was skinny, and her brown hair was dry and messy. It had not been taken care of for a long time. Her lips were pale and cracked, and the lower half of her face was soft. It was female. "Sir, the person is here." The Special Forces soldier saluted to the officer waiting on the side. "Confirm her physical characteristics. Don't let her wake up," Feng Jun said. He was the person in charge of this handover. This woman in the restraining gown was Yi-Etching, a major prisoner taken out from Bell of Death Island overnight. The team doctor said, "Don't worry, I gave her a large dose of sedatives. She's sleeping soundly now." "Check again." Feng Jun looked at his watch. It was almost time for the handover. He was a little nervous. He had a mission this time, and he also had to find out about Han Zhao's current situation. He did not know who was coming for the handover, and whether or not they would give him face. Although Feng Jun knew Han Xiao, he was not confident when he thought about the Han technician's personality. Time passed by, and everyone waited quietly. The night wind blew gently, and the grass on the ground rustled. Occasionally, the buzzing sound of insects flapping their wings could be heard. Other than that, there was no other sound. The atmosphere became very tense along with everyone's state of mind. Whoosh, whoosh, the sound of a rotor slicing through the air rang out. Feng Jun's spirit was aroused, and he looked up. In the night sky, a helicopter flew over. It lit up its indicator light and flashed a signal. Feng Jun quickly got someone to respond. After the signal was matched, the helicopter landed. Feng Jun quickly observed it and found that there was no sign on the helicopter. He did not know which faction it belonged to. However, even if he did not know the other party's background, Feng Jun could see that Han Xiao had indeed joined another faction. His heart was heavy. "Where is she?" A masked man walked out of the helicopter. Feng Jun waved his hand, and the team behind him handed over Yi-Etching. The masked man turned on the computer to check. After confirming that there was no mistake, he moved Yi-Etching onto the helicopter. The helicopter immediately took off. The entire process only took a minute, and there was no delay at all. Feng Jun did not have a chance to communicate. He could only watch helplessly as the helicopter flew away. Taking out his phone, Feng Jun called Gu Hui and reported. "He really did join another faction. We can't find him. This faction should be hiding him." Gu Hui muttered. What kind of faction was it? On the helicopter, The masked man removed Yi Yeching's metal eye mask and restraints. Suddenly, Yi Yeching, who was supposed to be sleeping, opened her eyes and stared at the masked man. Neither of them said a word. They just looked at each other for half a minute. Yi Yeching lowered her head and used her fingernails to cut open the flesh on her forearm. She picked out a bloody chip listening device and crushed it into pieces. In fact, she had not slept at all. She had been pretending all along. As a pharmacist, how could she not have trained her resistance to drugs? Sleeping pills had no effect on her. Being imprisoned on Bell of Death Island for a few years was all a disguise. What did they exchange me for? Yi Yeching's tone was calm. She did not feel that she was in danger at all. It was as if she was chatting with an old friend. However, she did not know the masked man at all. Some information. The masked man looked at Yi Yeching with interest. Cheap. Yi Yeching frowned and said with dissatisfaction, "You're interested in my ability to concoct medicine, right? Why do you think so?" The masked man said playfully, "Apart from this, you probably won't be interested in my other abilities," Yi Yeching said indifferently. "After all, you're too strong." A few days ago, when the guards on Bell of Death Island injected her with sleeping pills and brought her on the plane, Yi Yeching knew that she had become a bargaining chip. She finally saw the light of escape. While maintaining the disguise of sleeping, she listened to the conversation of the escorts. When she found out that there would be a handover, Yi Yeching planned to use her own ability to escape after the handover and regain her freedom. Yi Yeching's ability was to control plants within a certain range, so her senses were very sharp. The masked man gave her the feeling that he was a beast hiding under human skin, as if he would pounce on her at any time. He was even more dangerous than when the Special Forces soldiers were always pointing guns at her head when she was escorted by Star Dragon. Yi Yeching immediately knew that there was no hope of escaping, so she gave up the idea of resisting. "I wanted to escape, but it seems that I'm courting death," Yi Yeching said honestly. Han Xiao pulled down his scarf and smiled. "You're very rational." For this handover, Han Xiao specially disguised himself and personally came by plane. He knew that Yi Yeching was not simple. Sending someone else might cause trouble, so it was best for him to go personally. As expected, Yi Yeching had a backup plan. If he did not come personally, she might have escaped. Yi Yeching's temperament was very calm. She was not surprised at all in the face of unexpected situations. She had a calmness that would not change even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of her. She looked like someone who was good at research and would never be afraid of accidents and experiments. "What do you need me to do?" Yi Yeching asked. "I'll tell you when we get there." Han Xiao took out a device and scanned Yi Yeching to see if there were any other eavesdropping devices on her. At the same time, he was thinking about how to make Yi Yeching willingly stay in a shelter to work. Although he had temporarily intimidated Yi Yeching, if there was a chance in the future, he felt that Yi Yeching would not give up on escaping. He did not have the time to keep an eye on her. Chapter 231. The helicopter carried the two of them back to where they came from. On the way, Yi Yeching seemed to have accepted her fate. She was very quiet. Her life as a prisoner on Bell of Death Island had made her used to the feeling of not having freedom. It was just moving from one cage to another. At least with this man who called himself Black Phantom, her treatment should be much better than on Bell of Death Island. Black Phantom, I have never heard of this person before. Yi Yeching thought to herself. She had been imprisoned for a few years and knew very little about the changes in the outside world. She browsed through the changes in the past few years on the computer and realized that the name Black Phantom had only appeared half a year ago. Unbelievable. In just half a year, he had risen like a comet. His strength was even more terrifying than the criminals on Bell of Death Island. Those criminals were all monsters who had been famous for a long time. There was one piece of information that made Yi Yeching extremely shocked. The Germinal organization, which was extremely powerful before she was imprisoned, was actually forced into a dead end. And the instigator was actually an ordinary traitor. When she saw this piece of information, Yi Yeching could not believe her eyes. She was silent for a long time before digesting it. Her emotions were very complicated, and in the end, it turned into a sigh. The world was changing rapidly. After a few years of imprisonment, the outside world had changed a lot. Also, what the hell were the Inhumans mentioned in the information? Sanctuary 3 was in sight. Yicheng put down the computer and looked out the window. Surprise flashed across her face. That construction site is where we are going. Black Phantom, Sanctuary 3. What is a sanctuary? Han Xiao smiled. You still have a lot of things to understand. I know. Emerald Grass nodded. She brushed her messy hair aside and asked softly, Is it safe here? Han Xiao did not answer. He pointed at his eyes with his index finger and then pointed at Sanctuary 3, which was getting closer and closer. He meant for her to see for herself. Yicheng searched for the keyword sanctuary on the computer. After a long time, she found the answer. So, it is the plan of the Darknet. Who would have thought that this giant hidden in the shadows would also surface and receive funding from the Six Nations? Their goal is very simple. Indeed, there is no safer place than this. From a bird's eye view, the gray metal ruins had undergone a drastic change. A new area had been carved out from the desolate ruins. Players and construction teams were shuttling back and forth like ants. Various construction machines were rumbling. The abandoned buildings, bridges, roads, and other structures in this new area were all leveled and replaced with new buildings. The atmosphere was brand new. More than half of the towering concrete walls had been completed. Countless players were climbing up and down the walls, creating a hubbub of activity. The helicopter landed on the landing pad. Huang Yu, who had already received the notice, came up and reported everything that had happened in the past few days when Han Xiao was away. They were all trivial matters, and Huang Yu handled them well. He was indeed suitable to be an assistant. He was a talented secretary. Yicheng looked left and right. Her eyes finally stopped on Han Xiao's face. I didn't expect you to be the person in charge of this sanctuary. No wonder you need me. Han Xiao did not comment. He encouraged Huang Yu and brought Yicheng to the cold storage. After looking at a large amount of Shadow Stalker Viper material, Han Xiao explained the work and then stared at Yicheng, waiting for her reply. Yicheng pondered for 2 minutes, nodded, and spoke with assurance. The Shadow Stalker Viper's brain, kidney, gallbladder, mucus sac, heart valve, and tailbone cone are all potion materials. They're suitable for making steroids and hormone drugs. Their eggs contain an ingredient called gynaluoxysimimpi, which promotes bone growth and metabolism. It can be extracted to make a highly effective healing agent. Since you have so many eggs, I could try to breed a group of Shadow Stalker Vipers. Also, you just said that feeding high-energy waste can produce radiation crystals. This is a renewable resource. Yicheng immediately became very professional when she talked about what she was good at. She sounded more confident when she spoke, and there was a sense of arrogance that came from her confidence in herself. What skin? Han Xiao didn't hear clearly and was confused. Yicheng rolled her eyes. Her expression seemed to say that she should leave the professional matters to the professionals. You're just a layman, so don't get involved. Compared to her cold and indifferent attitude just now, Yicheng's expression was more lively now. She seemed to have realized that her situation was not serious, so she became more relaxed and removed some of the disguise that kept people thousands of miles away. That skin sounds like something good. It's fine as long as you know what it is. Han Xiao put his hands behind his back and nodded pretentiously, deliberately creating an aura of I know what you're talking about. Yicheng burst out laughing, then quickly stopped laughing. Huang Yu, come here, Han Xiao called, and Huang Yu, who was waiting on the side, ran over. Han Xiao pointed at Yicheng and said, This is the pharmacist I hired. Arrange a room for her. Huang Yu nodded and brought Yicheng to an exquisite residence. Then, according to Han Xiao's instructions, he gave her some information about the shelter. The room was brand new, and the area was not small. At least, it was much bigger than the prison cell. Emerald Grass laid on the bed and let out a comfortable moan. After sleeping on the hard iron bed for several years, she finally touched the soft bed again. It was like sinking into cotton, as if her whole body was sinking. Huang Yu stood awkwardly at the door. Yicheng didn't avoid this action. She treated him like air. He didn't know if he should leave or not. He knocked on the door, coughed, and said, Then you have a good rest. I'll leave first. After he left, Yeching picked up the information and browsed. Her eyes flashed. Tens of thousands of Inhumans gathered in the shelter. They won't die. I don't have to worry about test subjects, and I won't be infected. It's perfect. I won't repeat the same mistake and cause a plague. Plus, the shelter is free and safe. It's not a bad thing to stay here for a while. I still need time to digest the changes in the outside world. In the office, Han Xiao leaned on the recliner and stared at the tablet on the table. The screen showed Yeching's room in real time. Yeching had a criminal record and couldn't be trusted. Therefore, Han Xiao had a backup plan. He installed a few hidden cameras in the walls of the room to monitor Yeching's every move. Yeching's performance earlier also fell into his eyes. Han Xiao narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, her performance before and after is very different. When she first got on the plane, she was calm and indifferent, but at the beginning, she intentionally or unintentionally showed her feminine side. Maybe she was pretending to lower her guard to lower my guard. This is also a disguise. He couldn't be blamed for being suspicious. In his memory, Yeching was a liberal who wasn't controlled by any forces. She had her own way and was very eccentric. Because he valued Yeching's ability, Han Xiao was very cautious. After all, she was an important figure in 2.0. There were other benefits to having emerald grass in the guild. Players could exchange jobs, quests, for emerald grass's guidance and become apothecaries. With her in the guild, his plan to create a player's main city would be further improved. In order to build a player's main city, NPCs with various functions were necessary. Sir, I've already arranged her. At this time, Huang Yu walked in to report. He took a few steps forward and came to the side of the table. He glanced at the monitor screen and stopped talking. His expression became very strange. He seemed to have found something incredible. Could this be the legendary voyeur? Could it be the officer's hobby? I won't be silenced, will I? Huang Yu hurriedly took a step back and lowered his head, pretending as if nothing had happened and pretending that he hadn't seen anything. Han Xiao knew that Huang Yu had misunderstood. He shook his head helplessly and was too lazy to explain. If it was a misunderstanding, then so be it. The great mechanic Han had never cared about how others looked at him. Don't tell anyone, Han Xiao said. Huang Yu thought that Han Xiao didn't want others to know about his weird hobby, so he quickly nodded and swore. Yeching was very efficient and started working very quickly. The players didn't know about the deal between Star Dragon and him, and the efficiency of information exchange between players and NPCs was very low. However, to be on the safe side, Han Xiao asked Yeching to wear a mask to hide her identity. Now was not the best time to reveal her identity, so she had to be more careful. Due to the asymmetry of information, the players were at a disadvantage in terms of information sensitivity. If there was no mission or story introduction, they wouldn't know what information the various forces needed, and they wouldn't know what the forces were doing in the dark. Most players were busy doing missions, earning money, and farming equipment. Coupled with the mentality of a player, they wouldn't chat much with NPCs, and the possibility of them talking about other NPCs was very low. Since it was for safety reasons, Yeching naturally had no objections. Emerald grass made all kinds of potions, and the output was very high. Han Xiao got the best quality potions from the healing potions and steroid hormones, but there were still many mediocre quality potions left. Han Xiao allowed emerald grass to sell them to the players, showing them the multiple functions of the sanctuary. Potions had always been very popular. They were equivalent to red and blue potions and enhancement potions. They were usually very expensive and restricted the players from using them in large quantities. Even so, the players still needed potions. Yeching's appearance made the players overjoyed. The news spread quickly, and all the players knew that there was a new NPC selling potions in the sanctuary. The players who came to buy them all stepped on the doorstep, and Yeching's workshop was very crowded. Yeching was very curious about the Inhumans. She realized that the players were the best test subjects, and they were very easy to talk to. As long as she asked, they would usually help issue potion testing missions, and she didn't have to worry about the consequences of failure. They were the perfect test subjects. Yeching was like a fish in water, and she liked staying here even more. Sanctuary 3 was a good place. Han Xiao still had the potions that he got from Lewis Research Institution, but he didn't plan to sell them yet. They were all good products, and the effects would only be more obvious when the players' levels increased, so they could be sold for a good price. Speaking of Lewis Research Institution, Han Xiao thought of a small problem. The institution should have known that the person who robbed them was Black Phantom, but they hadn't done anything yet. Looks like you're scared by my name and don't dare to take revenge. Han Xiao chuckled to himself. It was best for the forces to know their place. It would save him a lot of trouble, and he wouldn't have to tear this long-term meal ticket with his own hands. Chapter 232. It was the 20th day of the construction of Sanctuary 3. The West District and North District of the Grey Metal Ruins were divided into temporary sanctuary areas. The initial form was completed. The city walls protected the city. The energy plant, housing, power grid, and internal life support system all had basic modules and could be operated. Han Zhao's 3-month goal of the Sanctuary 3 main storyline was only 3 out of the 13 construction requirements. There were only 10 days left until the end of the month. He could complete it in this period of time. This way, it would be equivalent to completing the mission 60 days earlier. According to the multiplier, he would receive 6 times the reward. The more experience, the better. Han Xiao would never let the fat meat in his mouth slip away. What was completed in a month was only the initial form. The entire Sanctuary 3 main storyline requirement was to completely complete the entire sanctuary. There was still a long way to go. Luckily, once the progress was on track, he would not need to worry about the construction anymore. However, Han Technician did not care much about it in the first place. With Huang Yu's help, Han Xiao had a lot of free time. In order to claim credit, Huang Yu was very hardworking. He was so busy that he wanted to vomit bile every day to show his usefulness. When the time came to award him internally, his contribution would definitely not be small. The assistant that Bennett sent was quite capable. Until now, Han Xiao was quite satisfied with Huang Yu's efficiency. He handled everything in an orderly manner. The only bad thing was that Huang Yu was a man. He was not pleasing to the eye at all. As the saying went, if there's something to do, the secretary will do it. If there's nothing to do, the secretary will do it. This urban legend had been passed down for decades. Han Xiao had only heard about it, but never seen it in person. He still remembered that before he broke up with the shop owner downstairs, the 30-year-old single old man always bragged to Han Technician about how many CEOs he knew. He said that the secretaries were alluring and seductive. Just the smell of their perfume was enough to fill him up. Anyway, there was no tax on bragging. For the 5% discount, Han Xiao was too lazy to expose him. The single boss yearned for an extravagant, unnutritious, and extremely exhausting lifestyle. In the eyes of the single boss, a beautiful woman's fart was like the warm breeze of early spring with a slight floral fragrance. He was obsessed with women. Every time they talked about this topic, Han Xiao would never hide his disdain. He would harshly criticize the single boss, saying that such a life goal was depraved and that he had no desire to improve himself. If he had the time to daydream, he should hurry up and update the shelves. Don't stock fake instant noodles anymore. I don't even have seasoning packs when I eat noodles. Every time I eat them, I just eat them dry. Be careful not to go to the Consumers Association and expose you for the content and price of instant noodles. Other than the assistant's ugly appearance, everything else in the shelter was going smoothly. After spreading the news on the forums, there were now 60,000 players working in Sanctuary 3. It was 100 times livelier than a market. There were people seeking to team up, set up stalls, chat, do missions, PK in the wild, rob, and extort. There were about 130,000 to 150,000 players in the entire southern continent, and almost half of them were gathered in Sanctuary 3. It was not hard to imagine how popular it was. There were a lot of players, but there were only about 2,000 wanderers. After all, the environment in the Gorst Wasteland was harsh, and there were not many wanderers. In order to achieve the player's main city plan, there had to be enough NPCs to complete the functions of the city. Now, there was the sanctuary, main storyline to attract the players, but after the sanctuary was built, if there was not enough attraction, the players would scatter like birds and beasts. It was like the mess after a feast. All good things must come to an end. Han Xiao did not want to end up like watching him feast and watch him collapse. Not only did he want to occupy the players' people, but he also wanted to keep the players' hearts. Therefore, he had to massively increase the residents of the sanctuary, and it would be best if there were many important people with special functions like Yeching to enrich the functions of the sanctuary for the players. The most direct way to increase the population was to let other large settlements move over. Han Xiao immediately thought of people like Lu Cheng and Overmera, and he secretly put them in the list of candidates. Clang! The metal finger blade and the foldable alloy sword clashed fiercely, and sparks flew everywhere. They were in a stalemate, wrestling with each other, causing the weapons to vibrate nonstop and make a grinding sound. In a small, empty square, Mad Blade had mechanical claws on his arms, and he fought fiercely with Hao Tian, who was waving his foldable knife. Pork Bun watched the two professional players fight from the side. For privacy reasons, he did not record it. Further away, Han Xiao leaned leisurely on his recliner, bathed in the sun, and watched the two fight. Mad Blade, Angry Sword, and Hao Tian were all professional players. In order to train their skills, they hit it off immediately and often fought with each other. It was like a fire that could not be stopped, and they had to PK more than 10 times a day. The Pro League was about to begin, and the professional players had to hurry up and prepare for it. The period between level 20 and level 40 was the period where PK was the most popular. In the entire sanctuary, players could be seen PK in the wild everywhere, which had a negative impact on the security. Han Xiao gave the order that the sanctuary was a safe area and no fighting was allowed. If they wanted to fight, they could go to the abandoned city, and he would not care what happened. At the same time, they could help to demolish the old buildings. Only the safe area could be considered a main city. The two of them fought for a long time and finally stopped. Mad Blade was slightly weaker. It was normal for mechanical pugilists to lose to pugilists who specialized in melee combat in the early stages, but after reaching the higher levels, they would have their own specialties. After sparring more than 100 times, Mad Blade did not win even once. However, Hao Tian did not underestimate Mad Blade because of this. Instead, he was very surprised. "You have a lot of potential and are very suitable for the pro scene," Hao Tian said encouragingly. Hao Tian said encouragingly. He had high hopes for Frenzied Sword. The fact that Frenzied Sword was able to fight with a veteran god like him for so long was enough to show his potential. After all, Frenzied Sword was just a newcomer to the esports scene. Although Hao Tian was cold and arrogant, it was because he focused on training his gaming skills. He was excited to meet an expert, and he felt a sense of camaraderie with Mad Blade. Frenzied Sword scratched his head. He was not upset that he had lost to great god Hao Tian. Instead, he had learned a lot of tricks from Hao Tian, and his battle skills had become much better. He realized that he did indeed have a lot of potential in close combat. Han Zhao's eyes were like torches, and his advice was correct. The weapon Mad Blade was using now was called the Cheetah Power Claw. It was a cold weapon blueprint that Han Xiao had obtained from the knowledge combination. The Cheetah Power Claw was similar to the mechanical arm. It was an exoskeleton mechanical structure that covered the forearm. The difference was that the fingers were equipped with claw-like blades that rotated and cut through a 1 centimeter thick steel plate with a single swipe. This piece of equipment was specially made to be sold to Frenzied Sword. Frenzied Sword was one of the earliest players to follow him, and they had known each other since the closed beta. He had always been quite reliable, and he had planned for Frenzied Sword's path as a mechanical pugilist. The Cheetah Power Claw was suitable for Frenzied Sword's current level, and its melee damage was stronger than the lightweight mechanical arm. When Frenzied Sword's level increased, Han Xiao planned to give Frenzied Sword the composite compounded, split magnetic chain, split blades, and magnetically controlled metal armor. This combination would make Frenzied Sword stand out among the players. When Frenzied Sword became stronger, he would be able to do more things for him. Hao Tian was a pugilist. So Han Shao did not have any plans for him. He just wanted to let nature take its course. Maple Moon, on the other hand, chose the mechanic path. She had a special interest in manufacturing. She had even completed Yi Yeching's mission and was preparing to become a pharmacist. She had even volunteered to take care of Bear Cub. Now, she was taking Bear Cub for a walk, freeing Hao Tian from hell. As for Pork Bun, Han Shao did not have high expectations for him. As long as the reporter could run fast, it would be enough. Recently, Pork Bun had released a video introducing Sanctuary 3. The response on the forums was quite good, and he played a part in the expansion of the Sanctuary. In the past few days, the professional players who had accepted the hidden main storyline had completed their missions one after another. Han Shao found a few good candidates and put them on a backup list. He did not plan to expand the backup list for now. The current quota was 4 players, and it would not be good to have more. Ding dong. Just as he was casually sunbathing, the tablet on his lap received a message. Han Zhao's finger swiped, and he opened the message. He suddenly sat up straight, and his leisurely expression disappeared. His expression became extremely serious and serious. This message was very short, but it meant that the storm clouds that had been brewing for a long time had finally erupted. The 6 nations had gone on an expedition. Chapter 233. Among the 4 continents of Blue Star, the 6 nations occupied the North, South, and West continents. Andria in the middle was once the main battlefield of the old era. It was heavily polluted, the environment was poor, and the air was filled with radiation. It was deserted and abandoned, and the Germinal organization built it into their base camp. Half a year ago, when Han Shao sold the Germinal organization information, it shocked the 6 nations and caused the Germinal organization's bases to be destroyed. All along, the Germinal organization had been relying on these nails to make the 6 nations hesitate. Now that the threat was eliminated, the 6 nations had nothing to worry about. The prelude to the expedition began. War was not something that could be started easily, especially when the scale of the war almost covered the entire world. The mobilization of military forces and resources could only start the war when everything was in place. After a few months of preparation, the expedition finally started on September 16th, 688 of the galaxy calendar. More than a dozen large naval formations set off from their respective military ports at the same time. With the aircraft carrier as the core, they were accompanied by countless frigates and destroyers, carrying tens of thousands of soldiers. It was a mighty sight to behold. The 6 nations had discussed the strategic layout and the joint operation. The chief commander of the Navy was the top officer from Raylan, Lin Lin. He was a pure soldier, had no political leanings, was experienced, and had a reliable style. He was the commander that was unanimously chosen by the highest level of the 6 nations. Lin Lin commanded the naval fleet to attack Andria from all directions, a full-scale invasion. The Germinal organization arranged positioning measures and military forces around the coastline, and they also sent out fleets and air forces to defend their control of the sea. The first wave of battle was missiles. The Germinal organization made the first move and launched long-range missiles, wanting to destroy the 6 nations' navy. However, they were shot down by the anti-missile tracking missile array of the aircraft carrier in the sky. The aircraft carrier returned the favor and launched missiles toward Andria. The Germinal organization relied on the land-based anti-missile device to avoid the disaster. Firing missiles at each other could not do anything to the 2 sides. The direction of the battle still depended on the result of the contact battle. The fleets engaged in a fierce battle in Andrea's waters. The flames of war ignited on the Blue Sea. The 2 armies clashed, and the combined cannons spewed out flames more than 10 meters long. The flames were blinding, and thick smoke billowed. Explosions occurred on the battleships one after another, and ships were sunk at any time. Although the main characters of a large-scale battlefield were the various war weapons, the role of supers could not be ignored. If no precautions were taken, a powerful supers could slaughter an entire ship of soldiers and destroy the battleship from the inside by themselves. All kinds of strange espers were causing havoc on the battlefield, and the existence of supers made the battle full of variables. Fortunately, the German organization's executive officers were strong, and the supers of the Six Nations were not weak either. Both sides had suffered losses, but they were able to restrain each other. Since the main storyline of the war had been brought forward by Han Shao, the players from the various factions who participated in the expedition quest could only watch. There was almost no room for them to interfere in the naval battle. In his previous life, the players would have already charged forward. Now, the influence of the players on the battlefield had been reduced to the minimum by Han Shao. Their levels were really too low. If they rushed up, they would just be cannon fodder. The naval commander of the Germinal organization, De Lost, used to be a high-ranking naval officer of a destroyed country. The Germinal organization fleet under his command was as fierce as a pack of wolves. However, the Six Nations knew when to advance and retreat. It was as if they knew the layout of the Germinal organization like the back of their hand. After the battle, the Germinal organization fleet suffered huge losses. On the southern battlefield, Star Dragon's Long Star and Flying Dragon fleets tore apart the formation. Hesla's Scorching Sun, Plunderbird, and Spear fleets drove straight in and destroyed the island port that provided the Germinal organization with supplies. The other four nations also had their own strategies on the battlefield. Before the battle, Han Shao had revealed the information of the Germinal organization's headquarters to Star Dragon, which gave the Six Nations an advantage in intelligence. They had the upper hand on the battlefield, and it was all thanks to Han Zhao's intelligence contribution. The leaders of the various nations did not forget this point. Dallas' flagship was sunk in the naval battle, and the cannonballs blew him into pieces. The deputy commander, Ansur, took over the command immediately. Facing the siege of the Six Nations Navy, Ansur could not do much alone. In just 3 days, he lost a large area of the sea. In the end, he wisely gave up the fight for sea control and moved his troops back to the mainland to defend. The Germinal organization was prepared to use Andrea's home ground advantage to fight against the Six Nations. After obtaining the right to control the sea, the Six Nations sealed off the surrounding waters. Various fleets surrounded the Andrea mainland and set up high-powered sonar that worked 24 hours a day to prevent submarines from attacking or escaping. It was like a net covering the entire Andrea mainland. The entire Andrea mainland was like a turtle in a jar, cutting off the Germinal organization's escape route. The aircraft carrier became a mobile air base, challenging the Germinal organization's air supremacy. It bombed everywhere and fought with the Germinal organization's air forces at the same time. Dropping nuclear bombs was the last resort, and it would not be used unless it was absolutely necessary. The troop transport ships sent the ground troops to the coastline. The ground troops of the Six Nations finally set foot on Andrea, and a fierce battle broke out. The result of the ground battle could determine the direction of the war. According to Han Zhao's intelligence, as long as the anti-missile military bases were destroyed, the aircraft carrier's missile lethality would be liberated, and the battle would be decided in one fell swoop. The Germinal organization had lost their escape route and was facing heavy encirclement. If this dragged on, their territory would be continuously breached and they would be killed. If the Germinal organization wanted to break out of this situation, they had to find other ways. The commanders of the Six Nations believed that the Germinal organization must have other strategic plans in the dark. Both sides were testing each other's trump cards. Anyone could see that the Germinal organization was at a disadvantage. The Six Nations had held many analysis meetings internally, and they all agreed that the Germinal organization had almost no chance of winning. The only thing that they had to pay attention to was the information that Han Shao revealed about the Hand of Death system to prevent the Germinal organization from acting out of desperation. In order to remove the nuclear threat, the Six Nations sent out special agent teams to infiltrate the various military bases that controlled nuclear weapons according to Han Zhao's intelligence. In the Germinal organization's headquarters, the leader was listening to the battle report. The upper echelons of the Germinal organization were gloomy. The battle had just started, and the situation was already falling in their favor. Indeed, in terms of pure strength, German organization could not withstand the combined attack of the Six Nations. Fortunately, they still had various plans and products that could be used as surprise troops, which should be very effective in the ground battle. In his previous life, when the Six Nations and the German organization were at war, the situation was equal, with the bases in various continents. The German organization controlled the attention of the Six Nations, and their military strength on the battlefield was basically equal. But now, the German organization was greatly weakened by Han Shao, and the scales of victory seemed to be tilting toward the Six Nations. The situation was completely different from his previous life. Everything was because of Han Shao, the little butterfly. No one knew how to win this battle, but the leader's calmness made everyone think that he had a plan. Port Home, Port Morningbird, Port Temafa. All 13 ports have been lost, and the Six Nations are continuously sending ground troops ashore. In the north, Raylan and Theseus are attacking Sunset Valley Base and Black Tree Base. If these two bases are taken, we will lose a portion of our missile silos. The other 4 countries are steadily advancing, breaking through the defense of Barker and Mu Haishan, heading toward the key bases. The enemy's goal is very clear: to remove all our missile and anti-missile bases. They actually know the details of the bases, so they definitely have important information on us. The officer was sweating profusely as he reported. "It's Zero." The leader's tone was calm, so calm that it was scary. He was already used to it. This result confirmed his guess that Han Shao had the clairvoyance superpower. As long as Zero was not eliminated, he would always be a big problem for the organization. Intelligence was only useful when there was enough power. Unfortunately, Zero was moving between the Six Nations, making use of others to do the dirty work. However, the German organization could not do anything about it. Zero was like a rat hiding from place to place. They hoped that Destiny's Child's prediction would be correct, and Zero would come to the headquarters to walk right into the trap. The leader had placed countless people around the headquarters. As long as he gave the order, they would form a huge encirclement that spanned thousands of miles. In order to catch Zero, no amount of fanfare would be excessive. Zero's strength was only above average, and it was very likely that he would come with helpers. Under such a large-scale encirclement, the leader was confident that no matter how many people Han Shao brought, they would all die. As for whether Zero had the clairvoyance ability and whether he would discover his trap, the leader had done an experiment. He had disrupted the military deployment and found that the Six Nations did not understand these changes. He could see that Han Zhao's clairvoyance had limitations, at least not omniscient. The leader could only choose to believe in Destiny's Child. As the passive party, he did not have much choice. He could only wait. Kill Zero, and we will have a chance of winning. Chapter 234. The impact of the war was very far-reaching. Other than Andrea, all the major forces in Blue Star had different reactions. Most of the people were terrified. Just like how Han Shao copied Bennett's declaration, the wounds from the old era were torn open, awakening the fear in people's hearts that had not yet dissipated. Everyone in society paid close attention to the direction of the war, and it also affected the people at the bottom. The German organization's flag was to overthrow the Six Nations. There were many survivors of the old era in the world. Their mentality was very complicated and indescribable. At the same time, the brutality of the war seemed to be contagious. Violent incidents appeared all over the world. Bandits in the wild took advantage of the chaos to commit crimes, forcing the wanderers to migrate on a large scale. This was a good thing for the Darknet. The shelter plan was immediately successful, and the 3 shelters attracted a wave of residents. Other than the southern continent, the players in the western continent and the northern continent who did not participate in the expedition mission and sanctuary mission also received other benefits. There were many missions in this chaotic world which satisfied their needs. Dust of the Fallen Seeds, current progress, 27. 1% the whole world was paying attention to the war, including the neutral Darknet. Han Shao, who was far away in Sanctuary 3, was also paying attention to the information. He had two sources of information. One was the strategic situation collected by the Darknet, and the other was the battle footage shared by the expedition players on the forums. The war had been going on for more than 10 days. The situation was changing rapidly. Han Zhao's progress of the German organization's main storyline mission, which had been stagnant for a long time, increased by 5% and was still rising. The information he leaked to the Six Nations could be counted as his indirect achievement. He could share part of the progress. The flames of war raged in the distance, and Han Zhao watched from afar. The prototype of Sanctuary 3 also took shape during this period of time. The players were overjoyed. They felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. This was the city that they had participated in building. A sense of belonging was born. Different from the overjoyed players, the residents in the sanctuary were affected by the atmosphere of the war. They felt slightly relieved that the sanctuary was taking shape, but they were more worried about the future. The war affected people all over the world. The only ones who were not affected by the atmosphere were the players. That was because they did not need to think about the future. The more chaotic the world was, the happier the players were. Han Zhao had obtained the short-term reward for completing the sanctuary's main storyline, which was 61 days ahead of the deadline. He had received an additional 610% EXP reward, which was a total of 68 million EXP. This was the most EXP reward he had ever received. The other rewards were the relationship with the Darknet. Favorability plus 1250, reaching respect. The overall rating of Sanctuary 3 jumped from D to B-, which showed that it was done perfectly this time. The short-term goal was no longer updated, which meant that from now on, there would be no instructions. In order to complete the Sanctuary 3 mission, he would have to complete the entire sanctuary. The higher the requirements of the mission, the higher the final mission evaluation. At this time, the construction of a shelter was on the right track. Han Zhao did not need to worry at all. He just left it there and let it build on its own. Beep beep. Bennett called and sounded surprised. The initial construction of Sanctuary 3 has been completed. Han Zhao laughed. Praise me. Bennett choked for a long time before he finally calmed down. He said in a helpless tone, seriously, the progress of Sanctuary 3 has surpassed Sanctuary 1. With the help of the Inhumans, you might be able to make Sanctuary 3 be the first to be completed. Keep it going. I have high hopes for Sanctuary 3. You know, with the outbreak of war, the wilderness is not safe, and the mass migration of wanderers will come in handy. Try to take in as many people as possible. Han Zhao nodded and jotted it down on a piece of paper. He planned to let Huang Yu worry about it later. The upper echelons of the Darknet could not believe this result. The progress of the so-called Sanctuary 3 had surpassed Sanctuary 1. How did this make sense? The use of the Inhumans was shown. The Darknet got inspiration from Han Zhao and planned to hire some Inhumans as workers. This was beneficial for the entire Sanctuary project. Bennett said a few more words and hung up the phone. He was also paying attention to the war, but he did not talk much about this issue. Because the Darknet was neutral, there was no need for them to get involved. However, he did not know Han Zhao's plan. The war has started, and the Germinal organization can't even take care of itself. I can go take a look around. Han Zhao thought. He had been waiting for this opportunity. He had 3 goals. First, to obtain the direct progress of Dust of the Fallen Seeds and increase the completion rate. Second, to save Aurora and free the future super-strong Hela. It would be best if he could form a good relationship with Hela. He had been keeping this matter in his heart, waiting for a good opportunity. Now is undoubtedly the best time to save her. The Germinal organization headquarters should be very defenseless. The third goal was about his own growth, and it had to be completed in the Germinal organization headquarters. Han Zhao planned to act alone without bringing anyone. This was the only way to be stealthy and agile. Andrea had become the battlefield, so it was easy for him to sneak through the fire zone and the Germinal organization's defense circle and find his way to the headquarters. His confidence came from the fact that he had finally improved his strength. Class advancement requirements. Complete 5 purple equipment with energy rank 60 and above. Progress. 5/5 class advancement successful. You have received a new class, Magnetic Ring Mechanic LV. Plus 70 energy, plus 2 DX, plus 1 END, plus 4 INT. You have received 4 free attribute points. You have received 1 potential point. You have learned the skill, Advanced Machinery Affinity. You have learned the skill, Surging Mechanical Force. You have learned the skill, Electromagnetic Energy Extraction. You have learned the talent, Energy Modification. Magnetic Ring Mechanics, also known as Beginner Mechanics, were beyond the scope of apprenticeship. They had pushed open the door of the Super Mechanic class and come into contact with the bizarre scenes behind the door. The characteristic of a magnetic ring mechanic was to use the electromagnetic energy in the construction of machinery on a large scale to increase the affinity of machinery, greatly increasing efficiency and quality. It was more like the style of a super. After becoming a magnetic ring mechanic, the energy of the mechanic class was called mechanical force, and it was used in all aspects of machinery. The new skill he had learned, surging mechanical force, was to increase the power of the machinery by expending energy. It was similar to overload, but it was continuous and did little damage to the machinery. It was considered a shallow use of mechanical force and a prerequisite for more advanced skills. Electromagnetic energy extraction was similar to energy modification, a growth skill that increased energy. It was limited to 100 refinements, and the effect was dependent on one's intelligence. The only difference was that this skill was exclusive to mechanics. Energy modification was a talent, and its introduction said, "You have found the trick to the construction of machinery, combining energy in every part of the construction process." The effect of the skill was to increase the efficiency and quality of the machinery according to the energy value. This was one of the characteristics of a magnetic ring mechanic, and it was a very core talent of the mechanic class. For example, his current energy was more than 1,600 points, and it could increase his efficiency by 20 to 25%. A cool feeling flowed out from his brain and spread throughout his body. Many thoughts collided in his mind. After completing the class advancement, Han Xiao closed his eyes comfortably. He could feel the obvious changes, and his control of machinery had increased once again. A brand new class with stronger abilities. I've finally completed the class advancement. Han Xiao secretly clenched his fists, and excitement surged in his heart. The huge amount of EXP on his interface could finally be used again. Magnetic Ring Mechanic required 3,500,000 EXP to level up from level 1 to level 2, which was 3 times that of Trainee Mechanic, from level 14 to level 15. The higher the level of the class, the more EXP it would take to level up. Without hesitation, Han Xiao immediately leveled up Magnetic Ring Mechanic to level 5. Without even blinking, he spent 20 million EXP. How rich? His total level had reached level 60. LV60 Promotion Mission, The Limit Trial. Push yourself to the limit in battle and feel the sublimation of life. Mission requirements. Obtain 2,000 trial points. Current points. 0/2,000 trial points are obtained by killing enemies. The stronger the enemy, the more trial points you will receive. The more difficult the process of winning, based on HP, the more trial points will be awarded. As expected, I'm not a player. The version has no restrictions on me. Han Xiao had expected this, but he still could not help but feel overjoyed. This meant that as long as he completed the promotion mission, he would become the only person on this planet to break through the LV60 barrier. He would stand at the top of the entire blue star, a peak that no one could reach. Just thinking about it made Han Xiao very excited. His vision was not limited to the planet, but the entire universe. This type of promotion mission requires a large number of battles and monsters. I'll have to see what kind of enemies will give me trial points. Low-level enemies definitely won't do. I'll definitely need high-level enemies, Han Xiao thought to himself. Since he was going to the Andrea continent, he could try to complete the promotion mission while he was at it. Only the battlefield would gather strong people, and only then would he be able to show off his skills. Along the way, he could also attack the Germinal organization. This was Han Technician's usual style. Putting this matter aside for now, Han Shao allocated all his free attribute points to intelligence. After that, he invested 25 million EXP and leveled up Advanced Machinery Affinity and Surge in Mechanical Force to the maximum. The sea of EXP that he had accumulated finally had a use. Seeing the EXP slowly turning into his own strength, Han Technician felt very fulfilled. Looking at the interface, his energy rank had exceeded the 2000 mark, and his grade had reached Grade C. Chapter 235. Grade C supers were at the peak of the Blue Star supers. Their physical resistance was strong, and their destructive power was even stronger. Even in the universe, Grade C was considered the dividing line of the basic forces. It was known as the basic standard of planet exploration warriors. It was not certain that one would reach Grade C at LV60. It depended on the difference in skills, talents, and attributes. Most of the LV60 Blue Star supers were only at Grade D+, and only those like Bennett were at Grade C. In the entire Blue Star, there were only about 20 Grade C supers. Han Shao was at the top of the list. He was even more confident. Since he had decided to go to the battlefield, he had to make preparations. After becoming a magnetic ring mechanic, his mechanical skills had improved by another level. Han Shao spent a few days to strengthen his original equipment and build some new machines that might be useful in the future. However, he did not waste too much time. After all, the German organization was in a bad situation, and they might turn Aurora into a drug at any time. He had to hurry to save her. When everything was ready, Han Shao called Huang Yu over in the evening and said, "I'm going to leave for a while. If there are no accidents, it should be about half a month. During this time, you'll be in charge of the daily affairs of the sanctuary." "I'm the one in charge." Huang Yu did not say this out loud and asked, "Your Excellency, where are you going?" "Don't ask what you shouldn't." Han Shao picked up his equipment bag and pretended to leave. "The construction of the sanctuary is on track. Don't make any mistakes. You'll have to bear the consequences yourself." Huang Yu's heart skipped a beat, and he quickly nodded. Han Shao walked out of the room and headed to the helipad. The helicopter was already waiting. Along the way, he observed the current situation of the sanctuary. There was an endless stream of players, and it was very lively. Other than the construction, the new Wanderers also frequently hired players to do some simple work. The prototype of the player's main city was already in his mind. This time, Han Shao planned to go alone to save people. The Six Nations had sealed off the Andrea battlefield. If he approached as a third party, he would be treated as an enemy and attacked. It was not an easy task to get to the battlefield. Han Shao could not get close by playing like before. He had to go through the official channels to enter the battlefield. In Star Dragon's harbor base near the South Continent, 3 heavy-duty transport planes were doing a pre-takeoff inspection. They were tasked with transporting important supplies across the ocean. In the small square beside the planes, hundreds of people in different outfits were either sitting or standing. They were not wearing Star Dragon's military uniform, but they all had the same aura. They were clearly divided into groups with more and less people, sizing each other up. These people were mercenaries belonging to different organizations. In such a large-scale war, mercenaries were inevitable, and the Six Nations did not reject the use of mercenaries. Mercenaries were like hyenas searching for the scent of blood, rushing to various wars to earn rewards. The world was bustling with activity for profit, and the world bustled with activity for profit. Even some of the contract killers of the Blood Pact Society wanted to get involved. Most contract killers were only affiliated with the Darknet. Strictly speaking, they were not official subordinates and were not under the command of the Darknet. There were quite a few supers among the mercenaries, and they were the strength that the Six Nations desperately needed. One could never have too many supers. The side with the upper hand in the war would receive help from all over the world, and they could use this help to expand their own advantage. Now, the ground war between the Six Nations and the Germinal Organization was at a stalemate. The super soldiers developed by the Germinal Organization had caused quite a lot of trouble for the Six Nations ground forces, and they were in need of manpower. There are thousands of battlefields in Andrea, big and small. The mercenaries were useful in small-scale encounters and to complete some tactical missions. Quality was more important than quantity. These mercenaries were going to take the transport plane to the mainland of Andria, and they were chatting with each other. Most of them were boorish men with no discipline and loud voices. The Star Dragon soldiers standing guard beside them were irritated, but they were under orders from their superiors and could not scold these mercenaries. Surrounded by the noisy environment, Qin Yuan crossed his arms, looked around, and said with a playful tone, "Blade Mercenary Group, Ram Mercenary Group, Ice Sculpture Mercenary Group, TSK. There are quite a lot of people here. They all want to earn some money from the war. Even the assassins are here to join in the fun. Crawl of the Poisonous Bees and Broken Shadow of the Blood Contract are the most famous among the assassins." Qin Yuan was a slightly famous mercenary, and the mercenary group he belonged to was considered the top level among this group of people, so he received a lot of attention. There were a few others who received the same treatment as him, including Crawl and Broken Shadow of the Poisonous Bees. These two assassins also had impressive battle records to prove their strength. Everyone in the circle knew that the Poisonous Bees and the Blood Pact Society were competitors and enemies, so these two assassins received the most attention. Many mercenaries were waiting to see a good show, but the two of them stood in the corner and were temporarily at peace. Broken Shadow occasionally looked at Crawl with fear in his eyes. Because Crawl was more famous, Broken Shadow was very cautious that Crawl would do him harm, so he was very cautious. In comparison, Crawl's posture was very relaxed and casual. He closed his eyes to rest, and his face was calm. He did not even look at the crowd and seemed very confident. He ignored Broken Shadow's gaze, and his attitude was somewhat aloof. Qin Yuan looked at them with interest. Suddenly, he saw the Star Dragon soldiers in the distance move aside and let someone walk in. Another newcomer. Qin Yuan looked over, and his playful eyes froze. They quickly turned into shock. His mouth opened wide, and he was speechless for a moment. The others followed his gaze and looked over. The scene that was noisy just a moment ago suddenly seemed to have been sealed by ice. There was silence, and astonishment crawled onto everyone's faces. A man in black slowly approached and stayed at the edge of the group, but it attracted the attention of everyone in front of him. There were whispers in the crowd. "Why is someone like him here? Black Phantom. He can represent the Dark Net. Is the Dark Net no longer neutral?" Han Xiao was not moved. He stood there quietly and did not say a word. Black Phantom's name was like thunder, and he was a legend of the Dark Net. He immediately stole all the limelight. No one expected someone of this level to work with them. They were not on the same level at all. Just by standing there, Han Xiao made these mercenaries, who had been so noisy just a moment ago, fall silent. The Star Dragon soldiers at the side were amazed. They felt that their ears that had been ravaged finally felt better. They looked at these mercenaries who were so arrogant just a moment ago with ridicule. "Sai, who asked you to be cocky?" Qin Yuan suddenly realized something and subconsciously looked in the direction of Broken Shadow. Everyone saw it and looked over. Black Phantom was also a member of the Blood Pact Society. Broken Shadow did not expect to see a legend of the same organization here. He wanted to go up and talk, but he was afraid that he was not qualified enough to enter Han Zhao's eyes. His eyes were filled with admiration and hesitation. However, Han Zhao's arrival was like a shot in the arm, and it gave him confidence. Broken Shadow stared at Crawl fiercely as if he was about to start a fight. "Damn it, why is he here too?" Crawl's back was already wet with cold sweat, and the calmness he had just now was gone. When he saw Broken Shadow's provocative look, he quickly turned around and walked into the crowd, choosing to be an ostrich. Broken Shadow only felt that he had vented his anger, and his body and mind were refreshed. It was the first time he experienced the feeling of using someone else's power to intimidate others. The atmosphere was weird, and everyone felt like years. Finally, the plane was ready, and the Star Dragon soldiers announced the start of boarding. This group of mercenaries seemed to have discussed it beforehand, and they all moved aside to make a path. At the end of the path was a confused Han Xiao. "Yohem, you go first." Qin Yuan coughed, and his tone was respectful. Wow, this treatment is not bad. Am I that scary? Han Xiao did not know whether to laugh or cry. He shook his head, picked up his equipment bag, and was the first to board the plane under everyone's gazes. He randomly found a seat and sat down. Only then did the others feel relieved and board the plane. Rumble. After a while, the plane took off. Han Zhao's official way to go to Andrea was to choose to become a mercenary of Star Dragon. This was the simplest way. The reason why he used the identity of Black Phantom and not a different face was that although the Six Nations accepted mercenaries to participate in the war, they would look at their background and exclude those who were not trustworthy. His identity as Black Phantom not only had the experience of working together to fight against the Germinal organization, but he was also a strong member of the Darknet, so he was very reliable. Of course, using the identity of Black Phantom would have a negative impact on the Darknet, which had always been neutral, but to Han Technician, this was not a big problem. In fact, he had another choice, which was to replace the other mercenaries and board the plane secretly. However, he felt that if he could go through the proper channels, he would not cause too much trouble. Just one word, kiss. The phone in his pocket vibrated. Han Xiao opened it and saw that it was a call from Bennett. As soon as he picked up, Bennett's roar shook his eardrums. Chapter 236. Han Xiao raised the phone further away from his ear and used his pinky to pick at his ear. "Lower your voice," he said unhappily. Bennett said angrily, "Why didn't you discuss this with me? You can represent the Darknet's position. If we participate in the war, we will lose our neutrality." The implications behind this, Han Xiao covered the receiver and glanced around at the mercenaries who were eavesdropping. The transport aircraft was the type that faced each other, so he could see everyone with a single glance. His eyes flashed with warning, and the mercenaries were stunned. They did not know how they had offended this big shot. Qin Yuan was the first to react. He immediately took out his earplugs and put them in his ears. The others also realized and quickly followed suit. Only then did Han Xiao let go of the receiver. Bennett's nonsense finally came to an end. He did not hear most of the middle part, so he pretended that nothing had happened. He casually nodded, indicating that he had been listening the whole time. "So, don't get involved in this. The Germinal organization will definitely lose. No matter what grudges you have with them, there is no need to do it yourself," Bennett said. "This is a private matter." "Nonsense. How can I do business?" Bennett said angrily. Han Xiao clicked his tongue. "The Germinal organization can't even take care of itself. It's better to beat them when they are down. At this juncture, it doesn't matter if we're neutral or not. So don't worry." "So, you didn't hear my analysis at all?" Bennett was shocked. TSK discovered. Han Xiao shook the phone violently and shouted, Hey, I'm on the plane. The signal is not good. Don't pretend with me." Beep. Han Xiao hung up the phone. If he did that, Bennett would definitely be unhappy. Han Xiao felt a little sorry. However, he would not stop doing it just because Bennett was unhappy. External factors were not the criteria to decide his actions. He only followed his own thoughts. Furthermore, Han Xiao knew very well that it did not matter if the Darknet was neutral or not. If the Germinal organization was destroyed, the Darknet would be the next target on the list. The Darknet's influence was complicated and complicated. He had always appeared harmless, but no one could be sure that he would be harmless in the future. A tall tree attracts the wind, and a jade ring arouses the envy of others. How could he allow others to sleep in his bed? In Han Zhao's previous life, at the end of version 1.0, the Six Nations had shown signs of suppressing the Darknet. Now that the Germinal organization had been destroyed 2 years earlier, the Six Nations were not as heavily injured as they had been in Han Zhao's previous life. Therefore, whether or not they should suppress the Darknet ahead of time was up for debate. At this time, a Star Dragon officer walked into the cabin, waved the tablet in his hand, and said, "We will arrive in Andrea in 8 hours. Our destination is Migratory Bird Port in the south. This is the basic situation of the southern battlefield and some missions. Take a look." After he finished speaking, everyone raised their heads and looked at him in confusion. The officer was a little confused. What was with this reaction? Shouldn't someone come forward to take the tablet? He was holding the tablet, and no one was paying attention to him. It was very awkward. Qin Yuan reacted and hurriedly asked everyone to take out their earplugs. He said awkwardly, "Can you say that again?" 10 minutes later, each of them had a computer and were checking the information. Han Xiao suddenly said, "Give me a map of the Germinal organization's battlefield and its basic layout." The officer agreed. The map and the enemy's layout were not confidential. The higher-ups had instructed them to take Black Phantom seriously and to comply with all reasonable requests. Star Dragon's quick response had something to do with Han Zhao's identity. In the game's terms, it was because his faction relationship and legendary points were high enough. The intelligence was also the reason why Han Xiao wanted to go through the official channels. The war zone was not so easy to pass through. If he went in without knowing anything about the enemy's layout, he would most likely end up in a mess. The Six Nations intelligence was very comprehensive, so it was convenient for him to think of a plan. There are a lot of troops stationed near the headquarters. There are many positions, both ground and air blockade. The Germinal organization's headquarters was a large group of bases. The real core was hidden in the explosion-proof fortification in the center. That was Han Zhao's target. Han Xiao noticed that there were many small gaps in the Germinal organization's layout. It seemed like there was a chance for him to directly enter the headquarters. The gaps were not obvious, but they were not too hidden either. It feels weird. Han Xiao rubbed his chin. His eyes flashed. The transport plane landed in Andria. The cabin door opened, and what greeted them was the smell of smoke and the tense atmosphere of war. Countless warships were anchored in the sea far away, and the roar of helicopters could be heard from time to time. This port was still full of burn marks from the landing war. Rows of Star Dragon soldiers were busy passing through. Han Xiao followed the crowd down the plane. What followed was the various official procedures. It took 2 hours for everything to be completed. The mercenaries finally passed through the barbed wire barrier, boarded the troop carrier, and walked along the main road into the battlefield. The troop carrier was heading to a frontline position, where it was fighting with a small Germinal organization unit in a ruined city. From the moment he got off the plane, Han Xiao had not stopped moving. He could feel the urgency of the battlefield. While crossing the battlefield, he could occasionally see refugees in ragged clothes staggering, retreating under the guidance of the soldiers. These people were all wanderers of the Andria mainland. Their lives were already difficult enough, and the war made their situation even worse. The effects of the war from the old era still filled Andria. The radiation pollution was very high, and there were very few plants and animals here. Most of the refugees had black and yellow scabs on their bare skin, and some even had tumors. When they arrived, Qin Yuan got off the car and went to look for Han Xiao before the officers arrived. "Your Excellency Black Phantom, we hope you can command us." Mercenaries respected the strong, and Han Zhao's position was unquestionable. It was the safest to stick together on a battlefield. It was instinctive to lean toward the strong. Han Xiao waved his hand, picked up the equipment bag, turned around, and left. Qin Yuan was stunned. He hurriedly shouted, "Where are you going?" "That's leaving the position. Our mission is—" Han Zhao's voice came from afar. "I'm not interested in that mission. I'm used to working alone." Everyone looked at each other helplessly. Fine, they were being snubbed. He did not even want them to stick together and went off to play by himself. A few days later, the scorching sun scorched the earth. The town of Miga was originally a settlement of wanderers, but now it was reduced to a small-scale battlefield. The short buildings were in tatters, and the ground was littered with bullet shells and craters. Traces of black smoke were all over the ground and walls, and there were still unburned embers giving off black smoke. Huff, huff. Panting sounds came from behind a half-collapsed building. A few supers wearing the Star Dragon insignia combat uniform were hiding behind the wall, carefully observing their surroundings. They were pugilist supers trained by the army. With the level of Blue Star civilization, pugilist supers were the easiest supers to popularize on a large scale. "Captain, we're in a bad situation. The Germinal organization has the advantage in numbers. They have a small team of 200 people, 7 supers, and 15 super soldiers. We only have 11 supers left, and they're all separated, Fong Yun said. I've already requested for backup. The Division 13 agents at the position will soon lead reinforcements. We just need to hold on for an hour, Fong Yun said in a deep voice. An hour? The enemy still has a bunch of damn inhumans. They're too hard to deal with. At this time, the sound of machine gun fire came from afar. Cries and screams sounded, but they stopped abruptly. There is still a group of refugees who did not manage to evacuate in time, hiding in fear. The German organization was worried that the Star Dragon people would disguise themselves as refugees, so they did not let any of them go and killed them all. With these refugees stalling for time, we won't be able to find them so quickly. Fong Yun's eyes flashed with pity, but he nodded solemnly. At this juncture, they had to use all possible factors to protect themselves. There was no room for mercy on the battlefield, and they did not have time to care about the lives of a group of refugees. There was no justice in war. Life and death were up to fate. At the same time, on the second floor of a building, Han Xiao, who had changed his face, wore a tattered robe outside, disguised as a refugee, and stood by the window, sticking close to the wall, carefully observing the situation outside. This battlefield was the target he had determined after a few days of searching. His plan was to assassinate a member of the Germinal organization here. He had used this trick in Dark Crow Valley before, and he was going to use it again this time. In this chaotic battlefield, he had a natural advantage. Trying to find him was like finding a needle in a haystack. When he was observing the deployment of the battlefield, Han Xiao had found a gap in the Germinal organization's formation. However, he felt that since he could find this gap, the Six Nations and the Germinal organization would most likely find it as well. It looked like a trap, so he decided to use his own method. If he wanted to enter the headquarters, it was too risky to force his way in. Furthermore, Han Xiao wanted to go to the underground headquarters, so it was much more difficult to enter. Using an artificial optical mask to constantly change his identity and infiltrate the headquarters openly was safer. Even if he was exposed, the enemy would not know who he was, so he could continue to change his face and hide. Chapter 237. Thud, thud, thud. Following the sound of footsteps, a group of people went up the stairs. The structure of the second floor was that the stairs were at the end. Surrounding the stairs were many doors, and there were bullet holes in the walls. Through the bullet holes, Han Xiao saw the IDs floating above the heads of these people. Unlucky, it's a group of players. He was wearing the facial simulator, so even if the players could not detect his real identity, they would at least be able to see that his attributes were a bunch of question marks, and they would immediately be on guard. As the group of Germinal organization players approached, their conversation could be heard. How many contribution points do you have? 127. 95. Killing refugees gives no contribution points. So annoying. The players of the Six Nations and Germinal organization had all received the battlefield mission. Killing players and characters of the opposing forces would give them contribution points. The war between factions should not have started at this stage, but Han Xiao had affected the storyline, causing the players to start fighting at a low level. They could only kill small fries, and their influence on the war was reduced to the minimum. Bang! The door was kicked open, and the two players who were talking just now walked in. They looked around and saw Han Xiao standing in the corner. F*CK, another refugee. One of them raised his gun and was about to shoot without hesitation, as if he was dealing with an ant. Whoosh! A few sharp blades flew out and turned into a cold light, circling around the two players' necks. Blood spurted out, and the two players turned into white light and disappeared, killed instantly. These players were around LV-20 and had around 300 HP. The damage range of the purple compounded magnetic chain split blades was 45 to 112, and their attack speed was extremely fast. Furthermore, with Han Xiao's LV-60 skills and talents, his machinery affinity was above 100%, and his intelligence was also increased when using machinery. The damage he could deal was around 3 times the attributes of the machinery on the interface. Excluding the enemy's resistance reduction, killing players of this level in 1 or 2 hits was a piece of cake. There were still a few players outside. Han Xiao put on the electromagnetic scanning glasses and observed the position of the players through the walls. The floating blades pierced through the walls and slit the throats of these players. No one could react in time. The only thing they could remember before they died was the cold light that flashed past their eyes. After taking care of all the enemies, Han Xiao curled his finger and put the compounded magnetic chain split blades back into his sleeves like a bird returning to its nest. After that, Han Xiao changed his face again and left the house quietly. He hid in the ruins and avoided the germinal troops walking on the streets. He found a new house and continued to observe the outside world, waiting for an opportunity. "I hope he's not a player again," Han Xiao mumbled. Rays of white light flashed, and this group of players revived at the germinal organization's camp more than 10 miles away. They were still in a daze, and their faces were full of confusion. "How did I die? Is there a bug?" Everyone hurriedly looked at the combat information on the interface. You received 275 damage. You received 267 damage. You were? Kill. All the players were confused. Meow, meow, meow. What is this? 2, 2, 2. A series of bullets landed on the body of a germinal organization super soldier and hit the exoskeleton of the super soldier. This group of monsters is too tough. Fang Yun's face was ferocious. He threw away his gun and punched the super soldier's exoskeleton fist, leaving a dent. The super soldier's strength was not comparable to a proper super, but the germinal organization had improved the technology through a lot of experiments and could mass-produce super soldiers, which was a headache for the 6 nations on the battlefield. Fang Yu and his team members surrounded the super soldier and quickly took him down. However, the sound of the battle attracted the attention of the germinal organization and other superhumans. A battle of encirclement started, and the scene was tragic. Blood was spilled everywhere. The team members fell one by one. Fang Yun was surrounded by the germinal organization's super soldiers, and he was covered in wounds. He spat out blood as he moved, and his injuries were very serious. A team member sacrificed himself to create a gap in the encirclement. Fang Yun rushed out without hesitation and escaped crazily. There were people chasing behind him. Fang Yun could not remember whether he had escaped for 10 or 20 minutes. His fatigue and injuries exploded. His legs gave way, and he fell down. He could not stand up and could only struggle to crawl. 2 germinal organization supers followed him and walked toward Fang Yun with sinister smiles on their faces. Fang Yun gritted his teeth. These 2 were the ones who had killed his team members. There were buildings on both sides, and there were not many places to run. Fang Yun decided not to crawl and stared at the 2 of them, squeezing out his stamina to exchange for a little bit of energy to counterattack. He was getting closer and closer. When he was only 10 meters away, a figure suddenly appeared behind the 2 of them. However, the 2 of them did not notice and continued to walk forward. Fang Yun was shocked. He saw that the person was dressed like a refugee. What happened? Sharp blades appeared beside the refugee, shining with a cold light. They cut the 2 of them from the back like butterflies, going back and forth a few times in the blink of an eye. The 2 of them suddenly froze. The next second, more than 10 wounds appeared on their bodies, and blood spurted out like water guns. Fang Yun was shocked. 2 germinal organization supers were killed by a refugee. Before he could say anything, the figure flashed in front of him. Then, Fang Yun's vision turned black, and he was knocked unconscious. Both of them are around LV-30. After looking at the combat information on the interface, Han Xiao was a little emotional. A long time ago, LV-30 was an insurmountable gap for him, but now he could easily kill them. The corpses were oozing blood like rotten bags, but Han Xiao purposely avoided touching their faces. In order not to delay his change of face, he first took out all the miscellaneous items on the 2 of them, including their IDs. He glanced at their names and then kept them. He tapped his chin, and a triangular scanning beam shot out from between his eyebrows. It scanned the face of one of the corpses, and the face instantly became identical. He took off the corpse's clothes and put them on himself. He heard the internal communication of the germinal organization through his earpiece. They were currently sweeping up the remaining Star Dragon warriors. Han Shao thought for a while, set the two corpses on fire, and threw them aside. As for the Star Dragon warrior, he did not care about him. Before Han Shao went to meet up with the rest, a new message came in through his earpiece. Attention, attention, enemy reinforcements have arrived. There are supers from Division 13. The enemy is too strong. Retreat immediately. Help! Help! I'm in the west. Han Zhao's eyes flashed. This situation was perfect for him to sneak in. Following the dense gunshots, Han Shao came to the battlefield and found that the Germinal organization was intercepted by Star Dragon's reinforcements. The supers from both sides were killing each other. Star Dragon's Division 13 agents had the upper hand. The bullets from their guns would explode into flames after hitting the target. The threat was very high, and the Germinal organization was obviously afraid of the consequences. High explosive bullets. Han Zhao's eyes flashed. He had not used up all the high explosive bullets before leaving Star Dragon. He did not know that after he left, Division 13 had collected all the remaining high explosive bullets. After burning 3 workshops to study the theory behind them, they were sealed as critical supplies and would only be given to the agents for key missions. There were no familiar faces among the Division 13 agents, but Han Shao vaguely remembered that he had met a few of them in Star Dragon. He could not help but think of Li Yaolin and the others. They must have been sent to the battlefield to do some mission, and he did not know if they were still alive. Thinking of this did not seem very optimistic. Or rather, he did not know if they were still alive. A Germinal organization's supers saw Han Shao appear and hurriedly shouted, "Kareth, come and help." The unlucky guy Han Shao replaced was called Kareth. This shout attracted the attention of Star Dragon's people, and the bullets flew toward him. Han Shao cursed and quickly dodged. His reaction was fast enough, and the bullets chased after him, leaving behind a trail of fire on the ground. He rarely used high explosive bullets, and he did not expect Division 13 to still use them. They were all leftovers. Han Shao did not want to fight, but trouble came looking for him. A Star Dragon agent turned around to deal with him. His whole body was covered in flames, and he charged forward with an unstoppable momentum. He pulled out a hilt and a retractable blade. It was the retractable blade that Han Shao had once made. "Yo, a dancer!" Han Shao curled his finger, and the compounded magnetic chain split blades flew out. In an instant, the pugilist's thigh was cut open, and he fell flat on his face. Han Shao rushed over and kicked him away. He crashed into an off-road vehicle, and the vehicle flipped over. This person would probably be bedridden for at least half a year. The Germinal organization's soldier who shouted Han Zhao's name was dumbfounded. When did Kareth become so strong all of a sudden? Just as he was about to call for Han Zhao's help, he saw Han Shao knock away the people blocking the road, jump into a vehicle, and escape without saying anything. The Germinal organization people were stunned, but they quickly reacted and jumped into their vehicles to escape. Since the situation was not good, once someone took the lead, others would follow. The troops escaped back to the temporary camp, and the officer immediately went forward to ask. The Germinal organization soldiers, who were covered in dust, hurriedly explained the situation. Han Shao pretended to be anxious and said a few words, but no one suspected him. More accurately, no one had the time to suspect him. The temporary camp was very busy, and after the officer heard the explanation, he immediately ordered the other troops to carry out other tasks. Chapter 238. At night, Han Shao heard that a transport team had transported a large amount of ammunition and firearms from a warehouse closer to the headquarters. They would return in 20 minutes. Han Shao locked onto a transport truck driver, changed his face, and lured him out. When he was alone, he twisted the driver's neck, then changed his face and clothes. Dealing with the body was a troublesome matter, so Han Shao chose a method that did not cause bloodshed, and there was no smell of blood. His method was very interesting. He directly found the players, used the quota to assign a mission, and threw the body to the players in the base to deal with. The mission name was unknown, but the players did not care about that. As soon as they saw the mission reward, They immediately accepted the mission to help. Convenient. Han Xiao sighed. He had a new idea. The players should be able to help him infiltrate. Even if the germinal organization's relationship with the players was fixed, they still retained the freedom to accept missions. They were potential allies, and the germinal organization did not know this. Disguised as a driver, he quickly received the order. The GPS in the car showed the route, and Han Xiao followed the convoy. Half a day later, they arrived at the warehouse. Han Xiao continued to use this method to obtain new information. In 2 days, Han Xiao, who had changed his identity many times, finally arrived at a position close to the headquarters. Beyond the barbed wire, he could see a group of dark bases in the distance. The atmosphere was strict, the scale was huge, and the area was not smaller than a medium-sized city. This was the headquarters of the germinal organization. Han Xiao knew that the real core area was hidden underground. Han Xiao asked the soldiers stationed here for information. It was almost impossible to enter the underground headquarters through conventional means, so he had to find someone with a special identity. Fang Yu slowly woke up and found himself lying on a hospital bed in a medical tent. Beside him were wounded soldiers. Seeing that he had woken up, the doctor walked over and said, "I've treated your wounds. You were unconscious for a day. How's Mythical Town?" The reinforcements were in time. The enemy was defeated, and some people escaped. We're calculating the losses. Let me see. Fang Yin coughed a few times weakly. The doctor hurriedly picked up the bottle to feed him. Fang Yin grabbed it, raised his head, and drank a big mouthful of water, gasping for breath. As a super, his treatment was naturally not bad. Very soon, someone brought over the battle damage statistics. Fang Yin could not wait to look at it. Seeing that all his teammates were confirmed dead, he could not help but feel sad and angry. He flipped to the enemy's death statistics, and suddenly his eyes narrowed. One less enemy. Fang Yu realized that the one missing was Kareth. His superiors quickly sent him the information of the enemy. This was a video of the battle. By taking a screenshot of the enemy's appearance and comparing it to the database, the identity of the enemy was confirmed. Basically, all the supers in the germinal organization were in the database. That's him. The young one is called Kareth. I saw him die with my own eyes. The officer frowned. But according to our eyewitness report, Kareth escaped and is alive and well. We didn't find Kareth's body. A chill rose from Fang Yun's heart. He immediately thought of that refugee. In the underground headquarters of the germinal organization, the leader was looking at the tactical map in silence. There were red and blue areas on the map. The red areas were the Six Nations troops, and the blue areas were the organization's forces. The red areas surrounded the blue areas, and the blue areas were constantly being compressed. This was the situation of the germinal organization. However, the leader did not care about these gains and losses. He did not put all his combat power into the main battlefield. Instead, he secretly prepared a counterattack, but he had not carried it out yet. This was because there was a prerequisite, and that was to first get rid of Zero, who could foresee. Otherwise, there would be no point in exposing the plan. Although Destiny's Child had predicted that Zero would walk right into the trap, the details needed to be fixed by the leader. He deliberately left some gaps in the deployment of the main battlefield. If Zero wanted to invade the headquarters, he would most likely take these routes. However, the news sent back by the hidden spies in the dark disappointed the leader time and time again. There was no one who could sneak in through those gaps. Han Zhao's method of sneaking in indirectly avoided the leader's spies. The longer this dragged on, the more anxious the leader became. The foresight of Zero was like the sword of Damocles hanging over the head of the organization, hindering their actions. Not here yet. The leader asked the spies as usual, but the result was still disappointing. He could not help but start to doubt whether Destiny's Child's prediction this time was a failure. This was because he really did not understand why Zero would come to the headquarters. He could not figure out what Han Zhao's goal was. He would never have thought that Han Zhao's goal would be Aurora. There was no warning at all. The industrial waste and the thick dark clouds dyed the sky gray. The thick clouds looked like they were going to fall at any moment, occupying the sky within dozens of miles. The faint rumbling of thunder rolled in the clouds, but the lightning was imprisoned in the dark clouds and could not penetrate. Just looking up made the Germinal soldiers feel depressed. The ground headquarters was a group of majestic bases. Vehicles came and went, and sentries guarded every intersection to check all kinds of documents. The central base was a huge steel fortress. The ferocious metal tower pierced straight into the sky, like a miniature version of the gray-black mountain range. The entrance was a huge alloy door. The side doors on both sides were personnel passageways, and the middle was a passageway for vehicles. It was spacious enough for 3 tanks to go in and out side by side. The outer walls of the fortress were also built with landing platforms. From time to time, helicopters would take off and land. The entrance was very busy. The troops went in and out. Rows of guards stood by the roadside, patrolling the surroundings to ensure safety. One of the guards was Han Xiao in disguise. His eyes darted around, observing the surroundings. The effect of the optical simulator mask was outstanding. This kind of infiltration method was unpredictable. After many operations, he finally obtained an identity that allowed him to enter the headquarters. In order to become a guard, Han Xiao patiently waited for a few days. There is no need to mention where the original owner of this identity went. When necessary, Han Xiao would not be soft-hearted. When it was time to change shifts, Han Xiao followed the troops into the ground headquarters. The space was spacious. The first floor was more than 10 meters high. After entering the door, there was a spacious space. Vehicles were loading and unloading goods, and officers were making arrangements here. It was noisy, engines were rumbling, and smoke filled the air. The air quality was very bad, and the PM2.5 index was probably off the charts. The west side was the garage door, and a large number of ground vehicles were parked inside. The other directions were personnel passageways. Han Xiao knew the basic structure of the Germinal organization's headquarters. The ground headquarters were connected to the underground headquarters. In the elevator, through identification with the identity card, people would be brought to the underground headquarters. There were many people with authority in the ground headquarters. Even some of the players who passed by had authority-faction relationship. Han Xiao secretly locked onto a suitable target. In a secret corner, he changed the identity of the target and entered the elevator with the new identity card. He swiped it on the identification device, and the green light lit up. Then, the elevator stopped to the ground floor. After opening, there was a metal passageway that led to the underground headquarters. After opening the door and walking in, the underground headquarters was solemn and quiet. The corridors were winding, and it was not as busy as the ground. The air was filled with a solemn atmosphere. The members walking in and out were expressionless, and their footsteps were hurried. It seemed that everyone was very busy. Han Zhao's eyes flashed. He hid the energy in his body and pretended to be an ordinary person. He straightened his collar and walked in quietly. In his mind, he was planning his next move. Coming to the underground headquarters was half the battle won. Sigh, this is called infiltration. Master Kong can finally rest in peace. If he delayed for too long, it would not be good for him. If his identity was exposed, he would immediately be in a situation similar to the unparalleled Creed series. Han Xiao touched his equipment bag and felt slightly relieved. He had to go through the back end of the mainframe to shut down the defense measures in order to save people in the headquarters. Furthermore, his other target also needed to be in contact with the mainframe, so he needed someone with authority to control the mainframe as a hostage. Han Xiao had already locked onto someone with enough authority. Chapter 239. In his previous life, Han Xiao already knew about Cyberlos. He was one of the higher-ups of the Germinal organization, and he was the one who turned Aurora into Aurora sauce. That was how he became known to the players. Cyberlos had no integrity and would betray any organization for the sake of his life. To him, he could only do more experiments as long as he was alive. The so-called loyalty was **T in his eyes. If he were to threaten him, Han Xiao was very confident that Cyberlos would obediently compromise for his life. Of course, That was under the condition that no one else found out. However, there was a small problem. The headquarters was huge, and Han Xiao did not know where Cyberlos was. At this time, a player with an ID floating above his head walked over. Han Xiaoxin's heart moved. There are also players in the underground headquarters. I can try using them. Just as Alux was about to submit a daily training mission, a Germinal organization soldier suddenly appeared in front of him and stopped him. He looked ferocious, but he had a kind smile like a crocodile grinning. This unlucky guy that Han Xiao replaced looked too boorish. Alux's butt tightened, and he trembled. What do you want?" Han Xiao laughed, but it made Alux's heart turn cold. He paused and said, "Little brother, I have a small matter that requires your help." He then set up an unsigned mission and sent it out. The request was to find out Cyberlo's location. He pretended that he had an urgent matter to report in the mission introduction as if it was real. Because the players would not doubt the description of the mission introduction, they would not be suspicious at all. Alux was surprised. This was the first time he had seen a mission that came to him on its own accord. The reward was quite good, and he was tempted. Furthermore, it was very easy to find Cyberlos. He could only be in the laboratory. "Okay, I'll be back soon." Alux went to confirm. Not long after, Han Xiao received the news that Cyberlos was checking the data on the laboratory floor. Han Xiao's eyes sparkled, and he gave Alux another mission, asking him to get the floor map of the headquarters. It was not easy for him to get such a thing himself, but the players who worked in the headquarters would know about it. Alux did not suspect anything. He had a map on him, so he passed it to Han Xiao. After reading it carefully, Han Xiao nodded to himself. He had a plan for the next step. The lab floor took up a lot of space. Han Xiao sneaked to the resting station of the researchers and blocked the camera in the corner with his compounded magnetic chain split blades. He quickly opened a box in the changing room and took out a few white coats and masks. He disguised himself as one of the researchers and walked to the lab floor. At this time, Cyberlos was in a large laboratory, commanding the white coats to adjust the functions of a new batch of super soldiers. He was browsing the data on the computer. Seeing that there were many people here, Han Xiao adjusted his mask and approached Cyberlos quietly. He flipped his hand and took out a simple detector. He scanned Cyberlos roughly, and the result was that there were no bugs. This result was within his expectations. Cyberlos stayed in the headquarters all year round and did not have a strong sense of security. He also did not have guards around him. Han Xiao turned his back to Cyberlos and pretended to organize the data on the table. He curled his finger, and a sharp blade entered Cyberlos' coat and stuck to his heart. Cyberlos felt a chill in his heart. He quickly reached out and felt a thin metal object through his coat. He was shocked and wanted to pull open his collar to take a look. At this time, he heard a low voice, clearly despite the noise around him. "Quiet, don't move, and don't scream. Otherwise, this blade will cut open your heart. Now, pretend that nothing happened and listen to my orders. If you don't die, if you trigger the alarm, die." Cyberlos looked around and saw that everyone was an enemy. He said in a low voice, "Don't be impulsive. What do you want me to do?" For the sake of his life, he did not dare to resist. "Leave the lab and don't make a sound." Okay, don't do anything." Cyberlos took a few deep breaths and said loudly, "You guys continue with the experiment. I have something to do." Then, he walked toward the door. The other researchers did not suspect anything. Han Xiao paused and followed behind Cyberlos. The two of them came to the corridor. Cyberlos saw Han Xiao behind him and knew that this was the person who held him hostage. He looked at him carefully and said in a low voice, "What do you want me to do?" "Bring me to the mainframe. Don't play any tricks. I need your permission. If anything happens, I can pierce your heart in 0.01 seconds, Han Xiao said. "I won't." Cyberlos felt the cold metal in his heart, calmed himself down, and led the way. He was not a warrior, and his life was more important than anything else. He knew that he could only compromise. He had no other choice and was not willing to take the risk of triggering the alarm. Along the way, they met many Germinal organization members. Cyberlos acted naturally and nodded as usual. Han Xiao followed closely behind. Others thought that he was Cyberlos' assistant, and no one suspected anything. After walking into a deserted corridor, Cyberlos carefully looked at Han Zhao's face and suddenly said in a low voice, "You're in disguise, Zero." Han Xiaoxin was shocked. How did he know my identity? Cyberlos continued. In order to catch you, the leaders set up a trap in the headquarters. Countless executives were on standby. You really did sneak in. Han Zhao's expression changed slightly. He felt that something was wrong. The leaders set up an ambush in advance and waited for him. Did that mean that he knew that he would sneak in? How is that possible? He did not tell anyone about his actions. Could it be that the leader has an esper who can predict the future? Then, am I surrounded now? For a moment, Han Xiaoxin was confused. He quickly calmed himself down and felt that something was wrong. If the leader really knew his target, how could he sneak into the headquarters so easily? This meant that the leader's knowledge was limited. He did not even know how he could sneak in by changing his face, so he did not take precautions. Han Xiao immediately thought of the gap in the Germinal organization's deployment and confirmed that this was a trap set by the Germinal organization. Too many questions appeared in his mind. Since Cyberlos took the initiative to ask, Han Xiao knew what he meant. He suppressed the murderous intent in his heart and said in a deep voice, "Tell me everything you know, and I'll consider letting you live." Cyberlos felt the murderous intent, and his back was wet with cold sweat. He forced himself to calm down and said, "This is all the prediction of Destiny's Child." Destiny's Child? Han Xiao frowned. He did not know that there was such a person in the Germinal organization. Destiny's Child's ability may be to predict the future, or it may be to decide the future. We're not sure. He predicted that you would walk into the trap. Cyberlos explained everything from the beginning. Destiny's Child's ability, his prediction of Han Xiao, the leader's deployment, he did not hide anything. For his own life, he would say anything. The Germinal organization is hiding such a person. Han Xiao was shocked. There was no information about this person in his previous life. It seemed that this was the Germinal organization's deepest secret. If Destiny's Child ability was to affect the future, did that mean that his idea of saving people was forced by someone else? Suddenly, his murderous intent rose. The mind was a person's private space. If it was invaded, it would definitely cross anyone's bottom line. There were many abilities that could affect the mind, such as psychic power, magic, and superpowers. Even in the universe, there were natural phenomena that had similar effects. For example, the psychic current was the amalgamation of thoughts, forming a wave band on the mental level, traveling in an invisible form in the universe. Wherever it passed, living beings with thoughts would hear the voice of the psychic current in their mind, and their thoughts would be affected. However, Han Xiao thought that this guess was too unbelievable. More than a year ago, when he saw Hela, he already had the idea of saving people. Furthermore, he had also analyzed the benefits of doing so. It was all from the perspective of benefits, and he would not be affected at all. Furthermore, he chose to sneak into the Germinal organization headquarters not only to save people, but also for other reasons. Destiny's Child's ability had to be limited, or at least its effect on him was limited. However, he had accurately predicted that he would come to the Germinal organization headquarters alone. This made Han Xiao feel relieved, but at the same time, he was also a little worried. He finally understood how scary it was to have an enemy who seemed to be able to predict the future. He immediately understood why the leader was so annoyed. "I've damaged the Germinal organization greatly. I'm afraid the leader wants to skin me alive and pull out my muscles." From what Cyberlos said, Han Xiao understood that there were a large number of executive officers and troops hidden in the headquarters, waiting to deal with him. Once there was any movement, they could surround him at any time. He was in a very bad situation. However, Han Xiao also realized that he had a huge advantage. That was, the leader only knew that he would come, but did not know the exact time or his exact goal. Then, I still have an advantage. I can't drag this out any longer. It's best to leave immediately after completing the goal. Han Xiaoxin was very serious. If he could complete the mission and leave without anyone knowing, that would be the best result. Chapter 240. The central control room was located in the core area of the headquarters and stored a lot of secrets. Cyberlos had the authority, so he turned off the security measures and brought Han Shao into the central control room. Rows of large hard disks were neatly arranged like a bookcase, and all kinds of indicator lights kept flashing. At the end of the central control room was a monitor and control panel. The style of the central control room here was simpler than the underground control room of Star Dragon Division 13. Cyberlos turned on the central control room and obediently entered the 10-digit password to authenticate his fingerprint and iris. In fact, there was a secret alarm system here. Entering a fixed password was a secret alarm command to prevent the higher-ups from being threatened. However, for his own safety, Cyberlos did not want to do anything. He believed that Han Shao could easily kill him before he was caught, so he did not want to take the risk. Therefore, the alarm system became a decoration. One had to admit that Cyberlos was extremely bold and lawless when he was doing experiments, but when it came to his own life, he immediately became as timid as a mouse. "What do you want to see?" "A comprehensive map of the headquarters," Han Shao said. Cyberlos operated, and a blueprint of the headquarters appeared on the screen. Han Shao took out the modified helmet of Viper from his equipment bag, took a picture of the map, and entered it into the chip's database, automatically building a 3D map model. During this time, he was also quickly memorizing the map, and soon he found the place where Aurora was locked up. Thinking of the Destiny's Child that was mentioned earlier, Han Shao wanted to go and see what was going on. However, Cyberlos said that only the leader had the authority to open the door to the Destiny's Child, so Han Shao could only give up on the idea. "Open your confidential information vault." Cyberlos did as he was told, and all the secrets were displayed in front of Han Shao without reservation. The trump cards of the Germinal Organization were all revealed. Another reason he came to the Germinal Organization headquarters was for this information. He had changed the storyline, so the Germinal Organization naturally had some new secrets that he did not know. Furthermore, he was only a player in his previous life, so it was impossible for him to have all the information, such as the parameters of various experiments, the actual deployment of various plans, and so on. Han Shao looked at the super soldier's exoskeleton. It was indeed a technology developed from the lightweight mechanical arm that he had once left behind. It treated his leftovers as a treasure. Han Shao recorded all the information, especially the detailed information of the Hand of Death system. Giving it to the Six Nations could create an unparalleled advantage and cut off the Germinal Organization's last resort. The more useful the information he gave, the faster his mission progress would be. And that was not all. Both the Six Nations and the Germinal Organization had a portion of advanced knowledge, so it was rare for them to take advantage of the situation. His goal was to obtain advanced knowledge. Han Shao had always liked to maximize his benefits. He was not only doing this for the sake of saving people, but also for the sake of information and advanced knowledge. Open the knowledge base. On the screen, the advanced knowledge for the martial path, Esper ability, and mechanic path appeared. Looking at the densely packed, specialized knowledge, Han Shao let out a long sigh of relief. He was secretly excited. After a few months, he could finally obtain new advanced knowledge. The Germinal Organization's mechanic class advanced knowledge was nerve connection. Confirm. Learning in progress. Please do not stop. 5%, 43%, 78% successfully learned. You have learned nerve connection. The new knowledge appeared in his mind. Han Shao closed his eyes and felt it for a while. He was secretly overjoyed. As the name suggested, nerve connection was an important technology in biomechanics. It could read the nerve signals of living beings and remotely control machines with one's thoughts. This was an upgrade of the control technology, and the reaction speed had increased by a few magnitudes. A new advanced knowledge meant that the number of combinations would increase. Mastering a new technology would allow him to fuse more blueprints, so there was no doubt that it would increase his strength. It was not easy. I finally got a second advanced knowledge. The previous one was the advanced material science from the Star Dragon pit almost a year ago. Han Shao did not stay idle. He also recorded the other advanced knowledge for the martial path and Esper classes. Even if he did not need them, he could sell them to the players in the future. The benefits were self-evident. Mastering the source of the technology would allow him to monopolize it and attract the players. This was a core ability, so there was a huge market for it. When the players reached a high level and started to need advanced knowledge, they would realize that Han Xiao could sell it in bulk. That scene, Han Xiao could not help but worry if his interface could handle it. Intelligence and knowledge. This was a huge harvest. Cyberlos watched the entire process. Suddenly, he felt a chill in his heart. He asked in a trembling voice, "You are an inhuman?" After this period of research, the various organizations realized that Inhumans had the ability to learn quickly. Han Zhao's behavior just now was a little suspicious. Cyberlos suddenly thought of this possibility. Han Xiao suddenly had a bad idea. He chuckled and deliberately misled him. "What do you think?" Cyberlos' hands and feet instantly turned cold. The archenemy of the organization was actually an unkillable inhuman. What was the point of fighting him? *T. What's the point of fighting? It's King over. But you appeared much earlier than the Inhumans. Cyberlos was shocked halfway through his sentence. He looked at Han Xiao as if he had seen a ghost. Could it be that Zero was the first Inhuman? The Inhuman phenomenon was actually spread by Zero, and it was actually his Esper ability? Ignoring Cyberlos, who was getting further and further away from the truth, Han Xiao checked the information. After confirming that there was no mistake, he asked, "Do you have something like a self-destruct program in your mainframe?" Who would be stupid enough to set up a self-destruct program in the headquarters? That would be crazy. Cyberlos wiped his sweat. At this time, Viper completed the 3D map and was ready. Han Xiao pulled Cyberlos up and yelled, "Turn off the defense measures in Area A4 and freeze all the surveillance cameras." Cyberlos hurriedly did as he was told. Area A4 was where the little girl with the Vitality Esper ability was locked up, right? "What do you want to do?" "I want that little girl. Let's go." Han Xiao pushed Cyberlos out of the mainframe room. Cyberlos was stunned. He could understand why Han Xiao snatched the information, but Aurora was the organization's secret. Han Xiao did not look at the information in detail earlier, but he seemed to know it like the back of his hand. Then, did he choose him as the hostage because he knew that he would cooperate? Cyberlos felt a chill down his spine. This feeling of being completely seen through was like a fear that went deep into his bones, gnawing at his soul. Cyberlos was a very useful amulet. The two of them successfully arrived at Area A4. After passing through the winding corridors, they finally arrived at the passage leading to Aurora's prison. The defense measures had been turned off backstage. The two of them came to the door, and the guard stopped them. "Open the door." Cyberlos tried to appear calm. The guard was confused. "Mr. Cyberlos, I did not receive any authorization. It's just a routine blood draw." "But someone is already drawing blood." The guard hesitated. Seeing Cyberlos' impatient expression, he still opened the door. Walking into the room, Han Xiao finally saw Aurora. She was thin and small, and her skin was pale from not being exposed to the sun all year round. Locked in a glass wall room, she looked like a beast on display in a zoo. The little girl was hugging her knees and curling up in the corner, looking at the few people in white coats outside the wall timidly. These people were pushing a small cart full of tools and preparing for the blood draw. Today, she had to draw her blood again. The pain was still fresh in her memory. Biting her lips, she hoped that this wait could be extended to eternity. However, she knew that this group of people in white coats would come in sooner or later and insert the needle into her blood vessels and bones. She could only watch as her life turned into a bright red torrent and left her body through the needle. Aurora had fantasized that her sister could save her and leave this place, but she knew that it was just wishful thinking. She did not want her sister to be in danger, just to save her. The only thing she could do was to appear optimistic and cheerful in front of Hela so that her sister would not feel worse and reduce her pressure. At this time, she saw the door open again, and the two of them walked in. She only saw a few flashes of cold light, and then the people in white coats and the guard fell down with blood spurting out. Aurora blinked her eyes, filled with confusion. She stared blankly at the glass wall that blocked her freedom being opened so easily. A ferocious-looking strange uncle walked in and extended his hand. "I'm here to save you. Come with me." Chapter 241. Aurora looked at the big hand in front of her, then looked up at Han Zhao's eyes and asked timidly, "Why did you come to save me?" Han Zhao thought for a while and said, "Just think of me as a kind person." "Who are you?" Aurora tilted her head. "You can call me Zero," Han Zhao said casually. Aurora's big watery eyes flashed with surprise. "So, your Uncle Zero." Han Zhao narrowed his eyes. The title of uncle made him feel like he was kidnapping a little girl. Cyberlos hesitated for a while and reminded him, "She's been brainwashed. If you want to save her, you better pay attention to this." Brainwashing? He knew about this rumor, but Aurora, it did not look like she was brainwashed. Han Zhao's eyes flashed and said, "Tell me more." "We have a few brainwashing methods," Cyberlos said softly. "Destructive methods to remodel the personality, gentle methods to distort the mind, and recently, we've been researching the chip, but there hasn't been much progress." "Which one am I?" Han Zhao was interested. Cyberlos immediately broke out in cold sweat. He braced himself and said, "I've seen your file. When we picked you up, you were already heavily injured and unconscious. You had obvious symptoms of amnesia. When you became a test subject, we used a gentle brainwashing method because we valued your brain and because you were muddle-headed." This was within Han Zhao's expectations. Back then, Lin Wei Xian had tormented him with conflicting images and sound effects for half a day, and anyone with an intelligence of more than 10 would be immune to it. Thinking about it, Han Zhao assumed that it was not some kind of destructive method. Since the matter was already over, Han Zhao did not have any thoughts of rejoicing in the aftermath. Her sister is a powerful executive. Her superpower is very special, and she has a special position in the organization. Because of this, Aurora's brainwashing is a gentler method. She keeps her original mind and maintains her normal personality, but once she says certain sensitive words, her brainwashed personality will be replaced, and she will completely listen to orders. Han Zhao roughly understood. Although Aurora was important, she was firmly under control, so there would not be any accidents. Her sister Hela was a sharp knife, so Aurora's personality was left as a means to order Hela around. This kind of gentle brainwashing method had a chance to be removed, so it was not a big problem at all. Aurora was originally a weak little girl, so if her brainwashed personality was awakened, Han Zhao would just knock her out with a slap and be done with it. Although this way, it would turn from kidnapping a lowly to kidnapping a lowly. "Hey, wait, how do you know me?" Han Zhao suddenly came back to his senses. "Sister, tell me your story. Why did Hela mention me out of the blue?" Han Zhao thought to himself. This little girl seemed to have a good impression of him. He did not know what Hela said to her. Strange, they should be enemies. Aurora stood up shakily, put her little hand in Han Zhao's palm, and said, "Thank you for saving me. Please take me away." Han Zhao was interested. "Aren't you afraid that I saved you to use you? Just like the Germinal organization?" Sister said that no matter how dangerous the future is, it is better than living a life worse than death. Aurora looked up, and her young face was full of seriousness. Seeing that Aurora was so understanding, Han Zhao was also relieved. His understanding of Aurora was limited to the rumors in his previous life. The opportunity for Aurora to be known by players was because after she was made into a potion, there was a side mission to investigate the source of the potion and find out about Aurora's deeds. Therefore, he did not know about Aurora's personality. Originally, he thought that it would take some effort, but he did not expect it to be so smooth. If they wanted to communicate, there would be plenty of opportunities in the future. Now was obviously not a good time to talk. The cameras in this area were fixed, so it was impossible to hide forever. Time was precious. Han Zhao moved all the corpses in, took off a white coat and a mask from one of them, and disguised Aurora. Aurora obediently followed his instructions. When his palm touched the bony body, Han Zhao realized how thin and weak Aurora was. Her pitiful appearance could easily make people feel pity for her. However, an old guy like Han Technician did not have much emotion. After the disguise was done, he turned to Cyberlos and said, "Take us to the underground tunnel. I promise we will not kill you when we are safe. The Six Nations like talents like you very much. You can still get funding for research from them." The escape route with Aurora naturally could not be the main entrance. The underground headquarters was connected to many underground tunnels, which were underground tracks for transporting resources and personnel. It was like an open spiderweb. The plan was to use Cyberlos as a hostage and use his authority to leave the headquarters through the underground tunnels. In order to make Cyberlos cooperate, Han Shao gave him a reassuring promise. Although Cyberlos was unwilling to abandon his research in the Germinal organization, at least he did not have to die. He could accept it and even felt relieved. The Germinal organization was a big ship that was about to sink. To be able to change the deck at this juncture and rely on the winning side might be a better choice. Just as he was about to set off, Han Shao suddenly stopped in his tracks. He realized that Aurora's small body was still too eye-catching, even if she disguised herself. He had an idea, and he took out an empty shoulder bag and said, "Sorry to trouble you. Come in." Aurora obediently did as she was told and crawled into the bag. As the zipper closed, her vision became pitch black. She could only feel herself being lifted up and moved. "Sister." Aurora curled up in the bag with her hands in front of her chest and prayed. The three of them quickly passed through the various floors and headed toward the underground tunnel. At the same time, the leader who was listening to the battle situation analysis took out his phone. There are traces of the mainframe data being accessed. Operator Cyberlos accessed a lot of secrets. The leader narrowed his eyes and became suspicious. He said to his assistant, "Find Cyberlos' location and transfer the surveillance footage to my computer." Immediately, the leader controlled the computer, entered the back-end command, and entered the host system. Looking at the operation traces, he immediately discovered that Cyberlos had turned off the various defense measures. The surveillance footage was also turned over, and Cyberlos entered the host room with another person. The leader's eyes were cold. He immediately determined that Cyberlos was being threatened. This stranger was most likely Zero. He did not step into his trap and used other means to sneak in. But, as long as you're here, don't even think about leaving. The leader quickly gave the order. Send all executive officers on standby to surround Areas C-11 and the underground tunnel entrances 3 to 11. Act in secret and don't alert the enemy. To be safe, the leader did not turn on the alarm of the headquarters. He wanted to secretly set up a death trap for Zero to ensure that nothing would go wrong. In a lounge of the underground headquarters, a group of executive officers were playing cards in boredom. Waiting for orders every day is so boring. "I really want to go to the battlefield," one of them said. "What's so good about the battlefield? There's danger everywhere. With those Inhumans and super soldiers as cannon fodder, why would we need to risk our lives?" Someone sneered. "Super soldiers? A bunch of monsters even more disgusting than the Inhumans. They're all half-finished trash," someone said with disdain. Proper supers did not care about these mass-produced soldiers. Beside them, Helith sat on the sofa in the corner with an indifferent expression. She closed her eyes and kept everyone at arm's length. She did not care about anyone, and no one cared about her. She was not in the lively atmosphere either. All of a sudden, Gila opened her eyes and turned to look in a certain direction. Anger and shock filled her eyes. The life imprint that she had left on Aurora's body had moved. Chapter 242. Something's not right. The three of them were heading to the entrance of the underground tunnel. Han Shao frowned, looked around, and said, "The atmosphere is not right. There are fewer people on the road, and I have a sense of danger. Did you trigger the alarm?" When he said the last sentence, he looked at Cyberlos with a piercing gaze. Cyberlos was shocked and quickly denied it. "No, I definitely didn't do it. Maybe the leader found something unusual. My authority is not as high as the leader's, and he found traces of me browsing the information. It really has nothing to do with me." Han Xiao gripped the equipment bag tightly and said in a low voice, "Let's go quickly." At this time, 5 floors above, the leader was rushing in their direction with a tablet in his hand. The screen was showing the surveillance footage. He sneered, "Are you starting to suspect something? When you get to the underground tunnel, my ambush will be complete. Don't even think about escaping this time." The leader did not expect Han Xiao to have the guts to sneak in alone. He even felt that such a powerful ambush was a waste. In his impression, Han Xiao's strength was still at the level of the Dark Crow Valley operation, about the same as Pan Quan. However, there were more than 50 executive officers in the headquarters who were stronger than Pan Quan. There was no way to escape from this inescapable net. The last layer of insurance in the encirclement was the leader himself. There were very few people who could match his strength. Even a legendary hero Bennett could only fight him to a draw at most. A few decades ago, the leader and Bennett had fought once, and it was a draw. The leader was also a person who stood at the peak of the Blue Star, and that was why he could control such a large organization. Seeing that Han Xiao was like a little bug that fell into a spider's web, falling deeper and deeper, the leader seemed to see the light of success. However, the next moment, he saw a dark red stream of light shooting toward Han Xiao from the end of the corridor. Hella seemed to have gone crazy. Her eyes were bloodshot as she stared at Han Xiao with hatred. It was not that she recognized Han Xiao, but she sensed Aurora's life mark. Her sister was hiding in the equipment bag that this person was carrying, curled up into a ball. Seeing this scene, how could Gila hold back? Her Esper ability instantly erupted, and her wine-red hair danced wildly like snakes. The thick gray and red auras intertwined with each other, condensing into an arrow that shot out. Her killing intent was almost tangible. Put her down. Seeing a stranger carry her sister away in a bag was like a parent seeing their child being carried away by a stranger. There was no way she could calm down in such a situation. Anger swallowed her rationality, and she could not think at all. Furthermore, her sister had a special meaning to her. She was practically her spiritual sustenance, and this was like adding fuel to the fire. This woman has become stronger again. Han Xiao was shocked. He hurriedly slid and dodged the cone-shaped dark red air arrow. The air arrow penetrated deeply into the steel wall, making his heart tremble. Hela's Esper ability was both physical and mental damage. Just the physical damage alone was already so strong. The main mental damage would be even more terrifying. It was estimated that she was angry, and the damage bonus was almost on par with his flaming will. Even if he had thick skin, Han Xiao was not interested in taking the attack head-on. He dodged, and with a thought, he destroyed the camera with 2 shots. He then shouted, "Hela, I'm here to save your sister." "You hit the wrong person, you prodigal woman." Before he could finish, Hela bumped into him and reached for the backpack, not listening to what he said at all. Han Xiao was helpless. He let go of the backpack and carried his other equipment bag. He activated the electromagnetic hover boots and the small maneuvering device and jumped to the ceiling to avoid the attack. Hela hurriedly put down the shoulder bag, opened the zipper, and looked at Aurora. "Sister." Aurora's crisp voice was full of surprise. "Are you okay?" Hela hurriedly checked Aurora's body. Seeing that she was not injured, she suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Only then did she remember that there was still an enemy. She suddenly stood up and blocked Aurora behind her. Her eyes were shining with a dark red light, and her face was vigilant. She looked like she was about to make a move. "Sister, you misunderstood." Aurora struggled to poke her head out of the bag and hurriedly shouted, "That uncle is here to save me. I don't know him at all." Hela looked vigilant and did not move. "He said he is Uncle Zero." Hela was stunned and could not believe it. "Uncle Zero? It's me." At this point, Han Xiao did not hide anymore. The alarms of the entire base rang. He knew that he had been exposed and had a helpless look on his face. When Hela suddenly appeared, he knew that something was wrong. With how much Hela valued Aurora, she would definitely fight with her life the moment she saw her. "How could it be you?" Hela could not believe it. The dark red aura fluctuated violently with her emotions. Why would Uncle Zero come to save Aurora? They should not be related at all. She could not understand Han Zhao's motive. Furthermore, they should be enemies. Why would his target be Aurora? Could it be that he wants to threaten me like the Germinal organization? All kinds of thoughts flashed through her mind. Subconsciously, Hela could not believe Han Zhao. No matter what, she could not let go of Han Zhao's act of secretly stealing Aurora. I will explain later. I have already saved your sister. The truth is right in front of you. Whether you believe it or not, I am here to help. You are now an enemy that the organization is chasing. Hela's expression was cold. She gathered her power in her hands, but did not make a move. Do you want your sister to continue being controlled by the organization? Now is the best chance to escape. Han Zhao said in a deep voice. The reason he saved Aurora was for Hela. Now that the main target was right in front of him, he naturally would not just leave. The alarms buzzed loudly. Hela rarely hesitated. She really wanted to take Aurora and escape, but the alarms of the base had already been triggered. She knew better than Han Zhao the current strength of the headquarters. The chances of escaping were too small. She was not willing to let Aurora take the risk. If only I did not make a move just now. This thought appeared and disappeared in a flash. However, if she had to choose again, Hela would still not hesitate to make a move. At this moment, Aurora tugged at the corner of Hela's clothes. Sister, take me away. Hela's expression tightened. She lowered her head and saw Aurora's face full of hope and desire. The words of rejection were stuck in her throat, and she could not say anything. Yes, how could she throw her sister back into a life worse than death? Thinking of the times Aurora had gone through, Hela's heart felt like it was being torn apart, and she could empathize with her. At least the most difficult step had been completed. Her sister had left the cage. This was what she had always dreamed of. At this moment, Hela's expression was firm. She gently stroked Aurora's little head and thought to herself, at most, if you fail, sister will die with you. Hela looked up at Han Zhao with a complicated expression and said, Come with me. She did not expect that one day she would fight side by side with Han Zhao. With more strength, the chances of escaping would be higher. Since Zero could sneak in without anyone noticing, he should not be too weak. After that, Hela put Aurora into her bag and strode in another direction. Han Zhao dragged Cyberlos and followed behind. Since he was exposed, he could not go to the underground tunnel. As the local tyrant, Hela might have other ways. Han Zhao was helpless. A fierce battle was unavoidable. Fortunately, he was mentally prepared for failure. Sai, being an unparalleled assassin, was not my intention. He did not know that Hela seemed to have exposed him, but in fact, she had indirectly helped him avoid the trap. Idiot! Who told her to do it? The leader was furious. Han Zhao's change of route had disrupted his plan and alerted the enemy. At this time, the encirclement had not been completed yet. As the camera was blown up, the leader did not see the conversation between Han Zhao and Hela. He thought that the two had already started fighting. All executive officers and headquarters, kill them all. I want Zero to die here, the leader ordered through the walkie-talkie. At the same time, the players in the headquarters received an emergency regional mission. Intercept Zero. Intercept Zero before he escapes the HQ. Mission reward: 200,000 EXP, LV-20 Dungeon Crystal. Germinal Organization Base Escape Battle: 200,000 EXP and Dungeon Crystal. Chapter 243. No pop-up window. Free to read. Bang, bang, bang. The large-caliber Berserk Eagle spewed out scorching flames, shattering all the cameras along the way. Han Zhao calculated silently. 38 seconds had passed since the alarm sounded. They were extremely fast and had already deviated from their original route. The enemy should have appeared by now. The current team composition consisted of 2 burdens and 2 capable fighters. It was too difficult to rush out recklessly. Han Zhao had no problem himself, but protecting others was a pain in the ass. In his previous life, Han Zhao did not like to do the mission of protecting others. There was little room for him to perform, and if he was reckless, it would definitely be GG. Han Zhao's eyes suddenly lit up, and he looked at Cyberlos with evil intentions. With Hela, why would he need this old man? He was just a dispensable addition. Since they were not going through the underground tunnel, Cyberlos was useless. Cyberlos trembled. Don't do anything rash. You need my authority. He's exposed. My authority has been frozen. There's no point in keeping him. Hela's expression was cold. Cyberlos was the upper echelon in charge of her sister's experiment. Her hatred was deep, and she raised her hand to kill Cyberlos. At this time, a large hand grabbed her wrist. Han Shao shook his head at her. Don't kill him. He's still useful alive. Then, he slapped Cyberlos unconscious. Han Shao had misled him so much, so it was time for him to mislead the leader. Hela shook off Han Zhao's hand and glared at him, but she did not insist on killing Cyberlos. Han Shao did not mind and asked, "What's your plan?" Hela was not used to having Zero as her teammate. Hearing this, she was silent for a while before replying, "I know a hidden passage that can escape the headquarters, but it's very far. It's 4 floors below us. If we want to go there, we have to break through the blockade of the headquarters. 4 floors below us." Han Shao recalled the map. It would take at least 5 minutes to go down 4 floors from here. Furthermore, the enemy would not allow them to run freely. Is your secret passage reliable? It was originally an abandoned secret passage, but I found it by chance. It's very hidden. Hela's words were concise and comprehensive, but she did not mention the specific location. In fact, she had hidden the truth. This secret passage was a backup plan that she had secretly prepared. Although she was controlled by the Germinal organization, she had never given up. She had always hoped that one day, she would be able to save Aurora. However, she had always been unable to bring Aurora out of the cage, so she had never taken action. Unexpectedly, the most difficult step had been completed by Han Shao, and this secret passage could now be put to good use. Hela could not help but feel lucky. She didn't expect that someone would save her sister. Hela glanced at Han Shao discreetly. She wanted to say something, but stopped on second thought. In fact, there was a more reliable method. The chances of taking her sister away were as high as 80%, but it would put Han Shao in danger. She felt that Han Shao would most likely not agree, so she didn't say it out loud. She just secretly calculated in her heart. At this time, footsteps sounded from the corner in front of them. A group of Germinal organization soldiers appeared to intercept them. Hela raised her hand and was about to attack, but Han Shao beat her to it. He opened fire with both guns, and the large-caliber bullets tore through the chests of these soldiers. Blood and broken bones flew everywhere, and the normal soldiers who were hit by his bullets felt like they had been hit by a grenade. Killing a group of soldiers did not increase the trial points on the interface. Only enemies that were strong enough would give trial points. However, since the minions were here, the stronger ones were not far away. As expected, waves of powerful auras quickly entered the range of his senses and rapidly approached him. "Don't attack. Protect your sister. I'll take care of the enemies," Han Shao said. Hela frowned and said worriedly, "Can you do it? There are some executive officers that even I don't have the confidence to defeat. Shut up and watch. If you didn't attack, I would have escaped." Han Shao was not in the mood to explain to her. Hela's expression froze. She felt that she was in the wrong and led the way in front. The leader was on his way. The cameras were all destroyed, and the surveillance images went black one by one. He could only understand the situation through the headset. The executive officers, super soldiers, and Inhuman teams are surrounding that area. Plus, Hela is holding Zero back. He won't be able to escape, the leader thought to himself. At this time, an executive officer's voice came from the headset. It was murderous. "Target found. I'm going." Chapter 244. No pop-up window. Free to read. The sound of an explosion came from not far away. Hela tensed up. She knew that Han Shao had started to attract attention. A large group of pursuers ran in the direction of the explosion. The leader was an executive officer. When he saw Hela, he frowned and said, "You're going in the wrong direction. The enemy is behind you. I have another mission." Hela put on her cold disguise again, pushed through the crowd, and hurriedly left. Along the way, she encountered more than 10 groups of pursuers. Hela did not dare to stop. Fortunately, everyone only looked at her curiously and did not question her. They hurriedly passed by her. The incident happened so suddenly that Hela's betrayal had not been exposed. Even with her strong heart, she could not help but secretly feel lucky that Han Shao had reacted in time and destroyed all the cameras, creating an advantageous situation. Only when it involved her sister would Hela's indifferent state of mind be affected. The journey to the target floor was smooth. All the members were rushing upstairs to stop Zero. There was no one around. Hela started to destroy the cameras along the way to prevent the exact location of the secret passage from being discovered. When the Germinal organization came back to their senses, they would definitely realize that Aurora had disappeared. After completing all this, Hela opened the secret door and entered the hidden passage. This was a dark and narrow passage that only allowed people to move forward while squatting. After closing the secret door of the passage, all sound was isolated. Silence was pervasive like the air. The nervousness was also expelled, leaving only the sound of gradually slowing heartbeat. It was only now that Hela could finally heave a sigh of relief and relax. Entering the passage, the escape plan was more than half successful. Hela opened the zipper of the backpack. Aurora poked her head out and looked around curiously. Did we escape? Almost. Hela patted Aurora's head lovingly. Aurora obediently rubbed the back of her hand and hid her face in the backpack, only revealing a pair of big watery eyes. Suddenly, she asked, "Where's Uncle Zero?" Hela paused for a moment. "At most 5 minutes. He should be here soon." Aurora tilted her head. "Sister, Uncle Zero seems to be very strong." "He's okay," Hela said vaguely. "Sister, why did he come to save me?" "How would I know?" Hela said, but her hand could not help but touch the photo hidden in her pocket. She remembered that when she was still at the base, Zero had seen this photo. Could it be at that time? However, at that time, Zero was too busy to take care of himself. Why did he remember such a trivial matter? With just one look at the photo, he planned today's operation. Could it be that his foresight ability allowed him to see the future? Hela shook her head. She still could not figure out Han Zhao's motive. She only felt that the figure was as elusive as a cloud of fog. The current situation of the Germinal organization was almost all caused by him. She was very afraid of such a person. She remembered that when they were at the base, Zero was still her apprentice. He was so weak that she could easily crush him. But now, in such a short time, he had become a person that even she was afraid of. Life was unpredictable. Hela was expressionless, but she sighed in her heart. "Sister, Uncle Zero, he don't always mention him." Hela was a little impatient. Although Han Shao had saved her sister, for some reason, she could not connect the Zero who was trained at the base with the current Han Shao. She always felt that something was missing. There was an inexplicable sense of familiarity, as if she had seen him somewhere before, but she could not remember. Aurora said in a wrong tone, "Sister, when you were telling me stories, you clearly admired him." "Nonsense." Hela pinched Aurora's face. At this time, a third person's voice sounded in the dark and narrow space. "Did I hear wrongly? You actually admire me?" Hela immediately turned around, and just as she was about to use her Esper ability, she felt an iron-like hand grab her wrist and press her against the wall. With the help of the dark red light, she saw the sudden appearance of the third person. It was Han Shao, who was supposed to attract the firepower outside. "Why are you here?" Hela's heart trembled. Han Shao let go of his hand and laughed. "I am everywhere." Hela's body softened, and she dispersed her ability. She remembered very clearly that she had only opened the passage once and had not opened it again. How did Han Shao come in? Through the wall? Han Shao smiled, but did not say anything. When he took the initiative to suggest splitting up, he already had a simple but effective plan. Of course, he would not bet on whether Hela would tell him the real location, so he had left 2 tricks up his sleeve. One was a simple tracker on Aurora's bag, and the second was a trump card that he had never used before. It was the Dion character summon card that he had obtained in the Western continent, which had a special effect of invisibility. Although he was very strong, he did not want to be surrounded. His main mission was to escape from the headquarters. Therefore, after killing number 1, Han Shao walked forward and destroyed all the cameras at the intersection, giving the Germinal organization the illusion that he was in that area. He then activated Dion's character summon card, turned back, and secretly followed Hela. Whether Hela was telling the truth or not, she was definitely using the real secret passage. Dion's character summon card ability was called You Can't See Me. Han Shao swaggered past, and the soldiers completely ignored him. Chapter 245. There was no pop-up window. It was free to read. The tunnel was winding, and after walking for a while, the front suddenly opened up. In front of them was an empty underground tunnel, and the exit of this secret tunnel was at the top of the underground tunnel wall, about 5 meters above the ground. The air was full of dust and moldy smell, abandoned and bleak, and there were large pieces of spider webs hanging on the wall. The main door of this underground tunnel had been locked and had not been used for many years. Hela jumped down with Aurora, raising a cloud of dust, and Han Shao also jumped down. This is an early underground tunnel, abandoned after the expansion of the headquarters, and no one has been maintaining it. I dug a secret tunnel in the ventilation pipe to here. The gate and cameras are all gone, and the railway is also broken. We have to go out. The exit is a secret door on the ground at the edge of the headquarters, and the whole tunnel will take about 4 hours to walk. Han Shao looked back at the entrance. Won't they catch up? No one knows we are here, but it's best not to be careless. Hela carried Aurora on her back and strode forward. Han Shao followed, walking side by side, and threw out a few small triggered mines. If someone caught up, this part of the tunnel would collapse. The three of them moved forward, and the atmosphere was silent. The situation was tense just now, so there were many things that they did not have time to investigate. Now that they had time, Hela had more doubts in her mind, and she frequently looked at Han Shao. Hela had some things to ask, but she was used to the cold personality, so she pursed her red lips and did not speak. Aurora was lying on Hela's back, burying her head in her sister's dark red hair, smelling her sister's body fragrance. Her face was full of comfort and peace, and she looked at Han Shao shyly. Han Shao raised his eyebrows. "Little brat, why do you keep looking at me?" Aurora whispered, "Don't you have a name? Or is it just Zero?" Hela pricked up her ears. "Han Shao, my name. Sister said you were brainwashed, and I don't know how you escaped." Han Shao pretended to be a swindler and said meaningfully, "Everything has its own destiny." Hela secretly rolled her eyes. "Big sister said that you're only in your 20s, but you look so old." Han Shao was embarrassed. "Didn't I disguise myself? This little brat doesn't have good eyesight." Turning his gaze away, he saw that Hela was silent. Han Zhao's interest in teasing her was piqued. He smiled and said, "Don't you have anything to say to me?" Hela supported Aurora on her back and said coldly, "Thank you. Your tone is too insincere." Han Shao casually played with a few bullets. "In order to save your sister, I came all the way here to enter the tiger's den. Even if you don't want to thank me with your body, at least speak politely." Hela turned her head and asked with a frown, "Where did you find out about my sister? What are your intentions?" Since the topic had been opened, she just asked. She did not believe that Han Zhao's motive was purely to save her. There must be another purpose. She guessed right, but unfortunately, she did not know that Han Zhao's target was her. "It sounds like a torture. I am now your benefactor and teammate." Han Shao raised his eyebrows and said jokingly, "You have to have a request attitude when you ask questions." Hela was still not used to the change of identity. After a moment of silence, she realized that she still could not say the word request. She said stiffly, "Tell me, why? Do you suspect that I'm like the Germinal organization, controlling your sister to harm you?" Han Shao laughed. "Maybe I'll try." Most words that could be said could not be taken seriously. Hela relaxed and said expressionlessly, "What do you want?" "I want world peace." Hela gritted her teeth. Han Shao had been talking nonsense for a long time. He did not say anything substantial at all, so she just stopped talking. Aurora asked curiously, "My sister told me your story. She said that you are very powerful. Are these all true?" "Oh, Hela actually praised me behind my back." Han Xiao looked over, but Hela did not react at all. She still had that cold expression on her face, and she did not even look at him. However, as the saying went, not speaking was equivalent to agreeing. Of course it's true. Chapter 246. No pop-up window. Free to read. Dark clouds covered the moon and stars, casting a dark shadow over the land. Under the night sky, the ground bases were brightly lit, and the searchlights tore through the dark sky. The guards were searching everywhere, and the sound of engines made the night seem as bright as day. Helicopters with searchlights looked down from above, and circles of light spots moved around the ground. The large-scale search caused quite a lot of trouble for Han, Xiao, and Selena. Fortunately, Hela was familiar with the terrain. The two of them narrowly avoided team after team of guards and hid in the shadow of a metal building at the edge of the bases. They peeked out to observe, and the southern base was in sight. There was a deep and empty area between the southern base and the base. The slope was inclined, and from their perspective, it was a downhill path. If they walked out, they would be able to see the entire base. At this time, the southern base was brightly lit, and there was a lot of noise. The searchlights swept over the slope again and again, like the white sun in the dark night. *T. The number of people in the base has increased by a few times. With the current alert level, there is no way to not attract attention. We have to go down the slope to get to the base, and there is no way to hide. Once we are exposed, we are dead meat, Hela said in a low voice with a serious tone. The power of the organization was like a towering mountain range. Although it had been beaten back by the Six Nations, it hadn't collapsed yet. It was still a colossus. On the other hand, they were alone and couldn't fight head-on. The only way was to sneak away. Han Xiao looked at the base and said, "There are cars, guns, and cannons. It is almost the scale of a small war. Just to deal with the three of us, they are really making a big fuss. To be precise, it is to deal with you. We're just an extra." Hela was expressionless. She paused and asked, "Don't you have a partner to help you?" She felt that Han Zhao's infiltration was supported by some forces, so it made sense that someone would help him escape. However, Han Zhao's denial made her heart sink to the bottom. "No help." Hela could not help but ask, "Then what will you do after you escape from the headquarters?" "The German organization will not stop the search. Even if you leave the headquarters, you will not be able to escape from the army. I'll just play it by ear." Han shouted in mind. He buried his head in organizing his equipment. Hela frowned. Since there was no support, then what was the point of following Han Xiao? The German organization wanted him. If they went their separate ways, he and his sister would be safer. She felt that she had barely repaid his kindness by taking Han Xiao out of the headquarters through the secret passage. She didn't feel like she owed him anything by suggesting that they split up to run for their lives. For the sake of Aurora, she had no choice but to go against her usual style and think of a safer way. "Let's talk about it after we escape from the headquarters." Hela calmed down and no longer looked at Han Xiao behind her. She focused on observing the situation of the battlefield. At the same time, in the southern position, the high-powered searchlights shone on the deep slope at all times. Not a single movement could escape the observation of the position. There was a multi-barreled revolving machine gun every 50 meters, ready to spit out metal waves at any time, waiting for the enemy. The situation of each position was transmitted to the big screen in the main control room of the headquarters through the monitoring terminal. It was divided into dozens of images for the leader to see the overall situation. In the southern position, the players who had been recruited as players had their own camps. They were now gathered together to wait for orders. The mission Intercept Zero had not failed yet. In the headquarters area, including the base groups, the players were shocked when they saw the German organization's huge formation. "We can't be of any use. If the mission succeeds, won't it be a free gift?" That makes sense. This might be a plot. We can only watch and can't interfere, Ilux, who was also recruited, said. Foreign players were not uncommon, so no one was surprised. No one knew that Ilux was actually a real European spy. Hey, do any of you know anything about Zero? At this time, a player with the ID White Hunt said, I know. As soon as he opened his mouth, he attracted a lot of questions. White Hunt, a quasi-first-rate player of the Temple of Gods Club, had obtained information from the Guild of Gods and taken the initiative to come to the germinal organization to trigger Find Zero. Therefore, he had obtained a lot of insider information. He explained it to everyone, starting from the escape of the test subjects to secretly causing trouble to the germinal organization. These stories were all from the perspective of the germinal organization, and they immediately shocked the players. That sounds impressive. That means he is a key character in the main storyline. He escaped from the organization, subverted the germinal organization by himself, and became the mastermind behind the war. This is a F***king legend. Maybe he is the main character of the planet. His favorability toward me is -30, someone exclaimed. White Hunt smiled. Although he is a key character in the storyline, there shouldn't be any interaction between us. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to force us to become enemies with him. Chapter 247. No pop-up window, free to read. The title of Shocking. The mastermind behind the war was uploaded to the Blue Star forum, and it was pinned to the top immediately. During this period of time, the Blue Star players' attention was attracted by the war, and they personally participated in a war that would change the structure of the world. They deeply felt that their words and actions affected the situation of the war, and it was very immersive. However, at this juncture, this post revealed the inside story. It turned out that there was a mastermind behind the war, Zero, who added fuel to the fire and caused the war single-handedly. Some players had already seen the bounty list, and they immediately remembered that Zero was a traitor with a high bounty on his head. They were very curious about this person, a traitor turning the tables and severely damaging the original organization. This kind of drama sounded like a legend. Starting the war secretly, he was definitely a key character in the main storyline. The post introduced Zero's deeds from the perspective of the germinal organization, and the players were amazed. They thought that the introduction was over, but they did not expect that there would be more content after that, and it also introduced Black Phantom's deeds. No special explanation was given, but for some reason, this was also included. The players patiently read on, and it would be good to know more about Black Phantom. However, when it came to the last part, the players' expressions changed. No matter if it was Black Phantom or Zero, they were the same person. What does this mean? Black Phantom and Zero are actually the same person? The players subconsciously doubted the authenticity of the post, but the post also included the video of Han Xiao causing trouble at the germinal organization headquarters, and it was solid evidence. Seeing was believing, and the players were shocked. The players were not familiar with Zero, but Black Phantom was an old acquaintance. From the start of the open beta until now, he had given them a lot of benefits and frequently interacted with them. When they saw him attacking the germinal organization headquarters, they actually felt that it was normal and reasonable. This was a sense of recognition that came automatically after they became familiar with this person, just like when they saw Master K killing God. They felt that this was how it should be. Now, his identity was finally exposed. He was Zero, and he was also Black Phantom. His name was Han Xiao. With the combination of the two identities, Zero's deeds completed the image of Black Phantom, and it suddenly became more complete. In the minds of the players, there was a fugitive who had struggled to escape from the germinal organization's control for freedom. His miserable life and desperate situation did not defeat him. He slowly grew up and became a super powerful figure. He secretly dealt with the organization that had caused the disaster to him and started a war that swept across the world. It was like an American blockbuster legend. The market for individual heroism was always very popular. Han Zhao's status in the hearts of the players rose again. One look, and they could tell that he was the main character of the planet, and the Germinal organization was the villain. Although there was no right or wrong in the world, people were used to making things easier to judge. Polarization was easier than diversity. The players did not care about the ideals of the Germinal organization. They were used to standing in the position of people they were familiar with. The image that Han Xiao created was equivalent to one of their own in their eyes. This post suddenly became a hot topic, counting Han Xiao's past and present life in detail. The Blue Star players felt like they were witnessing history and a legend. Tens of thousands of posts were added in an instant, and it was still increasing at a rate of hundreds of posts per second. On the official forum's hot topic list, it instantly soared to the top 10, and the popularity index was increasing every second. Just as Han Xiao expected, the combination of the two identities brought a chemical reaction that pushed his popularity to a new peak, and the impact continued to ferment, establishing his reputation and position in the hearts of the players. He had been making his presence known since the open beta, and he had laid the foundation for his current elevation. It was like accumulating a pile of dry firewood, and now that a little spark had been added, it finally turned into a blazing flame, and it was burning brightly. The players were the first group to know about the first-hand information on the forum. At this time, Han Xiao and the other two had only escaped from the Germinal organization headquarters for half an hour. Under the dark night sky, the off-road vehicle drifted across the barren land like a wild dog that was about to take flight. The towering and ferocious headquarters were far behind them. Han Xiao, who was in the driver's seat, had not taken off his mechanical suit, but he opened his mouth mask. With a cigarette in his mouth, he exuded a strong sense of familiarity. Hela, who was in the passenger seat beside him, was expressionless. The veins on her fair hand, those holding the armrest, were bulging. Chapter 248. No pop-up window. Free to read. Geniuses remember in 1 second. Love, go little. We provide you with wonderful novels to read. The first idea that popped up in his mind was to create equipment that could defend against missiles. Han Xiao happened to know of a basic-level, purely defensive mechanical blueprint that was suitable for him. It was called the Deployable Mini Explosion-Proof Fortress. It would instantly form a metal cover to protect the target and resist the explosion and shock waves. There were many kinds of defensive blueprints, the most well-known of which were the various kinds of energy shields. However, that required advanced energy knowledge, and the technical requirements for this small explosion-proof fortress were not that high. The blueprints could be fused with basic knowledge, and the defensive performance depended on the materials used. However, Han Xiao quickly rejected the idea of making one himself. He did not have a lathe when he was on the run, so he would not be able to complete any complicated manufacturing work. At most, he would modify the vehicles and weapons, dismantle the enemy's equipment, and make some simple things that he was familiar with. However, making a small explosion-proof fortress would be too much work. After eliminating this method, Han Xiao had a new idea. Missile defense. It still needs to be done by professionals. As soon as he escaped from the headquarters, the Germinal organization immediately mobilized. Under the orders of the leader, countless Germinal organization troops conducted a carpet search in the area of influence. Both the flying and ground forces were mobilized at the same time. The scale of the search was almost the same as a direct battle. An hour later, the Six Nations discovered the Germinal organization's movements. Since they did not know the details, they could only respond by increasing their vigilance to prevent the Germinal organization from having other strategic objectives. That night, they held an emergency joint analysis meeting to deduce the Germinal organization's intentions. The commanders of the various countries discussed intensely for more than half an hour. Through various signs, they finally came to an unbelievable conclusion. The Germinal organization was chasing after someone. That was strange. The Six Nations had already attacked the Germinal organization's base camp, and the Germinal organization still had the time to chase after someone else. The identity of the person being chased must be very special. Love Go Little say Netwoku the situation was still unclear, and the Six Nations were hesitating on whether they should stop the Germinal organization's operation. Although the enemy of their enemy was their friend, Raylan, Theseus, and Ordina were against rashly interfering to prevent them from falling into a trap. They felt that they should carry out their original strategy step by step. While the discussion was going on, the Star Dragon commander suddenly received a message from Division 13. Shock flashed across his face as he said, "Everyone, please stop for a moment. We have received important information. The target has contacted our intelligence agency. Please allow me to transfer his communication to the main channel." Everyone had different expressions. The screen flashed, and Han Zhao's face appeared on the screen. He was using his original appearance. The faces of the officers from the various countries changed. They recognized that he was Zero, who was wanted by the Germinal organization. The person who had been providing them with intelligence had finally appeared. Everyone was shocked. "You're the one that the Germinal organization is after? Why are you in the Germinal organization's territory?" Han Zhao said, "I infiltrated the Germinal organization headquarters and obtained key information from the mainframe. All their deployments, plans, and missile deployment details are in my hands. That's why the Germinal organization is chasing after me at all costs. Now, I want to make a deal with you." Everyone looked at each other. No one had asked Zero to steal information, but he had taken the initiative to do so. How much hatred did he have for the Germinal organization? He wanted to win the war more than they did. "Speak. Send out troops to help me. Involve the Germinal organization's troops and ensure my safety. Once I am out of danger, the information will be yours. Love, go, little, say." Han Zhao was prepared to use the information from the Germinal organization headquarters as a bargaining chip in exchange for the cooperation of the Six Nations. This information was originally meant for the Six Nations, but now it was being used to its fullest potential. At the beginning, Han Zhao's plan was to sneak into the headquarters and complete everything. However, Destiny's Child's prediction had led the leader to set up an ambush long ago, which deviated from his original plan. Han Zhao had no choice but to change his plan. The appearance of Destiny's Child was unexpected, but he was not depressed. Everything could not be smooth sailing. He was not afraid of accidents. He just had to adapt to the situation. An officer said coldly, "Empty words have no basis. Hand over all the information, and we will consider your terms." Chapter 249. No pop-up window. Free to read. Geniuses will remember Love Go Go Little in 1 second. Talk.net, providing you with interesting novels to read. The news was passed down layer by layer. The forces that were further away from the center of the war would take longer to receive the news. For example, the rogue warlord forces with limited information channels were considered to be the forces that received the news very late. The Overmera was one of them. As Theseus's partner, the Overmera family did not participate in the war directly. Instead, they were responsible for maintaining the stability of the northern continent. This was also an opportunity for the Overmera to develop. The Darknet's sanctuary plan inspired many warlords. Some of the warlord forces also started to try to build something similar. Their original intention was not to protect people like Bennett, but to benefit from it and gain more labor. Now that the Overmera family was led by the Shao faction, Shao Jin took the opportunity of Black Phantom's visit to do whatever he wanted. Shao Hai admired his father's methods very much. Although sometimes when he thought of Black Phantom as his godfather, it was like swallowing a lump of sh*t. Black Phantom had not appeared for a long time, and this made Shao Hai feel much better. In the study of the mansion, Shao Hai finished reporting the recent events. Seeing Shao Jin deep in thought, he could not help but ask, "Father, you don't seem to be satisfied with the current situation?" Shao Jin glanced at him. "I haven't gained a firm foothold yet. I'm still being controlled by others." "You mean Black Phantom?" Shao Hai did not understand. "Although part of your position is due to Black Phantom, the power belongs to us. He's not here, so he can't exert too much influence on us. This happens to be where my weakness is. Black Phantom let me get the position of the head of the family, but his influence is limited. He can't control our internal decisions. The other factions seem to respect me on the surface, but in reality, they're just following my orders. Our position is not stable, so we can only use the power of the Shao faction. The other factions have been avoiding and not contributing, so it's difficult for us to make decisions. Xiao Jin thought of Han Zhao's threat and added, Black Phantom is not easy to deal with, and I pay the price. Love go little say W. Chew. As he spoke, Xiao Jin stood up and took out a glass of precious red maple gold leaf wine from the wine cabinet. He poured 2 glasses, passed one to Xiao Hai, and took a sip of the other. He slowly said, Let's not talk about these. There is still a thorn stuck in the throat of the Xiao faction. Your brother Xiao Han is a wanted criminal of the Germinal organization. This is a hidden danger. Theseus's people have come to us more than once to collect relevant information. Now that the war is at its climax, all the forces are trying their best to wash away their ties with the Germinal organization, but we can't do that unless we find him and hand him over to the Six Nations. At the mention of his younger brother, Xiao Hai's expression became unnatural. Ever since he found out that Xiao Han, whom he had tricked, was still alive, he had been worried. I heard that Zero is inextricably linked to the current situation of the Germinal organization. Xiao Hai had mixed feelings. He was the one who did not want to see Xiao Han succeed the most. He was afraid of revenge. Although he had grown up with his younger brother and knew his weak personality very well, he could not ignore the possibility of his younger brother's personality changing drastically. What Zero had done was obviously not something that his cowardly younger brother could do. Thinking of this, Xiao Hai was very worried about revenge, although he still did not know what kind of person his younger brother had become. Knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. The assistant poked his head in and said carefully, Leader, Sei Chi is here to visit. Sei Chi was the leader of the Overmara Red Island faction. He had always been unhappy with Xiao Jin being the leader. Let him in. Xiao Jin frowned, put down the glass, and said slowly, Ever since I was elected as the leader, he has not come to visit me. There must be something wrong. Xiao Hai nodded and stood aside to wait. After waiting for a while, Sei Chi strode in with a hearty smile on his face. As soon as he entered the door, he said loudly, Leader. Xiao Jin did not change his expression. He nodded and invited Sei Chi to sit. Xiao Hai secretly sized him up. Seeing that Sei Chi's face had a hint of flattery, he could not help but feel strange. This natural and warm look did not seem like a person who was at odds with his father. Sei Chi took out a plan. This was a plan of action by Xiao Jin that required the power of the Red Island faction. Sei Chi had been avoiding it for a while, but now he took it out and said shyly, I've been thinking about it for a while. This plan is very useful, and I am willing to contribute. This time, I want to discuss the specific details. Don't worry, I will definitely have someone to contribute. Xiao Hai was pleasantly surprised and thought to himself, the Red Island faction has given in and officially acknowledged the position of the Xiao faction. Xiao Jin was also a little surprised. He nodded slowly and began to discuss with Sei Chi. Chapter 250. No pop-up window. Free to read. Geniuses will remember Love Go Small in 1 second. Talk Net, providing you with interesting novels to read. Han Zhao's true identity attracted the attention of all the major organizations. Zero could be said to be the initiator of the war, and Black Phantom was a powerful mechanic and assassin who stood at the peak of the world. Combining the two resumes together, the major organizations seemed to see the rise of another legendary star. It had been many years since such a legendary figure appeared. Now that he had the key information that affected the war, he had become the center of the storm. Naturally, he was the center of attention. For days after the news was released, almost all the major organizations in the world knew about Han Zhao's identity. 2 organizations received the most attention. One was the Overmara family, which was the birthplace of Han Zhao's original body. Many small organizations in the northern continent visited, and under Han Zhao's influence, the Overmara gained many new allies. At the same time, The news that Han Shao had become the elder of the Shao faction spread like wildfire. This ridiculous story became a stain on the Shao faction that could not be washed away. Looking at everyone who was trying to hold back their laughter, Shao Hai felt terrible and wanted to commit suicide. The other was the Dark Net. Han Shao was now a high-ranking member of the Dark Net. However, the major organizations found out that the Dark Net had not done anything, and no one knew what their attitude was. In the blink of an eye, 4 days had passed. Looking down from a sky, the sandy yellow wilderness was filled with smoke. A ferocious-looking off-road vehicle was traversing the wilderness, dragging a cloud of dust behind it. A kilometer or two behind the vehicle, a German organization's search team was chasing after it. 4 days, this is the 13th team. In the passenger seat, Han Shao was controlling the camera installed at the back of the car to observe the situation of the search team. He shook his head and said, "So few people here to deliver parts again." Hella, who was driving, glanced at him. She was so tired that she didn't want to say anything. The two of them looked like polar opposites right now. They had been on the run for 4 days, and enemies were everywhere. There were high-intensity battles every day, and Hela was not the great mechanicon who used machines to fight. Her strength came from her own Esper ability, and her Esper ability consumed energy and stamina. Every battle was a tough battle for her, and she was completely exhausted. Her face was covered in dust, and there were dark circles under her eyes. However, Han Shao was completely different. Using the modified Viper mech in battle, he was calm and relaxed. Moreover, most of the enemies chasing after him were crushed by him. In contrast, Hela could not deal with the enemies as easily as he could. As Hela drove, she felt like she was going to fall asleep at any moment. Even if she was tired, she didn't want to give the steering wheel to Han Shao. One side was a cliff, and the other was an abyss. At least there was a bottom to the cliff. "Sis, do you want some juice?" Aurora, who was sitting in the back, looked out and passed a silver bag of liquid. "This is not called juice. It's a synthetic refreshment drink used to relieve fatigue and raise the spirit. You can't." Han Shao looked back and saw the empty bags in the back seat. His mouth twitched, and he said, "Drink more." "But it's delicious." Aurora shrunk her head. When she was imprisoned, her daily food was the same nutrition paste. This refreshment drink was a new delicacy to her, and now she was especially energetic. At the beginning of the escape, there was only one Han technician, and they had to rely on snatching resources. This kind of long-distance chase was the stage for mechanics to show their advantage. They could eliminate the pursuers, dismantle their equipment, and turn them into parts. Then, they could create their own weapons. In the Pro League, mechanics were highly sought after in survival matches where there were external factors. Other than military canned food and some energy drinks, there were also a lot of parts. Han Shao modified their off-road vehicle. The internal engine, cylinder, and so on were all optimized, and it ran like a wild bull. There were traces of modification everywhere on the exterior, and it was very wild. The German organization's troops were restrained by the Six Nations, which reduced their pressure by more than half. The Six Nations also took care of the missile interception problem, so he did not have to worry about a missile being thrown at him if he fought in one place for too long. Han Shao looked at the rearview mirror and said, "Turn around and deal with them. Little brat, lie under the seat and don't show your head." Aurora obediently did as she was told. Hela was expressionless. She took the drink, squeezed it hard, and drank it in one gulp. Then, she turned the steering wheel, and the off-road vehicle made a fierce tail sweep, stirring up waves of dust, and charged at the pursuers like a bull. Han Shao quickly finished changing his equipment, and his appearance changed drastically. In order to adapt to the chase battle, he modified Viper and added a lot of long-range weapons, such as triple cannon on both arms, grenade launchers on both shoulders, extra magazines on both legs and back, and yellow bullet belts that wrapped around his body like ribbons. These were all taken from the enemy. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.